assumes special importance. The outcomes of this dialogue will shape the future conversations surrounding the world of artificial intelligence. Over the past day and a half, we have had the unique opportunity to engage with perspectives from across the board, and it has been a privilege to work with both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology to put this together. Conversations have revolved around AI use cases in agriculture, healthcare and education, identifying challenges in scaling these use cases, including but not limited to access to data, compute and sustainable financing. Through candid breakout discussions and expert interventions, we have collectively explored frameworks for responsible deployment for artificial intelligence and identified the need to build a global bridge that can help democratize access to AI for all. We are especially pleased that delegates from over 15 countries joined us for this discussion. What is perhaps more interesting is the group of stakeholders that have come together under this roof, which of course includes government participants, but also a range of international organizations, private sector, both big companies as well as smaller startups, academia, venture capitalists, and philanthropists. The biggest takeaway from these discussions over the last 1.5 days has been around collaboration. While a lot of different people in the room had different understanding of what collaboration means for AI impact use cases or for scaling use cases, one thing was quite clear, which is this diverse group of stakeholders gathered under this one roof would be a key starting point for a lot of collaborative efforts that is needed to translate the promise of artificial intelligence into real-world impact. This gathering would not have been possible without the wholehearted support of the Policy Planning and Research Division at the Ministry of External Affairs, headed by Ms. Aparna Ray. We would also like to express our sincere thanks to the India AI Mission for the opportunity to host this group of stakeholders together ahead of the India AI Impact Summit. I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Tata Trusts, our philanthropy partner. This dialogue would not have been possible without the inspiration and support of our dialogue partners, the Ekstep Foundation, in particular Shankar Marwada and Shalini Kapoor, who helped us conceptualize this workshop. I am proud to say that this group of stakeholders that we've been able to bring together in this room would not have been possible without the support of our knowledge partners. If you can just have that slide up on the screen, I will not go over all the names, there are 20 of them. But they've been instrumental in making the right connections and guiding us through the journey as we curated this edition of the dialogue. I'd also like to thank our media, outreach, and digital partners who have been critical in amplifying these discussions to a wider audience, both nationally and internationally. In particular, I'd also like to thank our director, Dr. Rudra Chaudhary, who've been a guiding force to drive these discussions, not only at the GTS Innovation Dialogue, but also other conversations leading up to the India Impact Summit in February 26. Also, a big shout out to the Carnegie India team, our event managers, and the hotel, who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the event goes smoothly. A few housekeeping notes before we start the formal sessions for the day. Please keep your mobile phones on silent, but we do encourage you to stay connected with us on social media using hashtag GTS Innovation Dialogue. We request that you remain seated during transitions between keynotes and panels to maintain the flow of the program. With that, I have the privilege of introducing our first panel, who would take us through the journey of India's AI Impact Summit in February, the key priorities for the summit, and a few expected outcomes from the summit. I'd like to welcome Ms. Debjani Ghosh, Distinguished Fellow at the NITI Aayog, Mr. Saurabh Garg, Secretary at the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Ambassador Marisa Gerards, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to India, Nepal, and Bhutan. This panel will be moderated by Archna Vyas, Interim Country Director for the India Office at the Gates Foundation. Can I have the video, please? to you, Archna.
All right, thank you so much. And can everyone hear me? Yes, it's working. So thank you so much. This is the most awaited session. It is an awaited session for me as well. And we are truly excited that the session is being hosted in advance of the India AI Impact Summit. Thank you to the team Carnegie, done a stellar job every year with the Global Technology Summit. Thank you to NITI as well as Ministry of External Affairs, but also my panelists who are representing their own ministries, but also co-chair of the working groups. So my first question, I would dive into the panel straight away. I'm actually looking forward to hearing from them rather than provide a precursor to the panel. We already know the context that we are going to be understanding the priorities of two of the working groups that are pretty significant. So maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Garg. Tell us about the working group that you are leading, which is on democratizing AI. What are the priorities? What do you hope and aspire to accomplish? And why is it important for such a working group that India has instituted working with the other partners?
Thank you. First of all, a pleasure to be here, and great to see the 2 days discussion that have happened. So, as possibly all of you are aware, we are having this AI Impact Summit in February, between the 15th and 20th of February. And as a run-up to that summit, 7 working groups had been set up, 7 chakras and 7 themes they cover. One of them is on democratizing AI resources. And the reason and the mandate of this group is to look at how the AI resources can be available to all. So we are looking at issues of access, of affordability, and as we delved into it, issues of agency also. We've started work in September, and this working group is co-chaired by Kenya and Egypt. And we've had a few rounds of meetings within the working group, where we had more than around 35 countries who participated in about 15 international organizations. Apart from that, we've had stakeholder consultations both within the country with those who are interested, and we had also as an international stakeholder consultation with people from different countries who are interested in this. So the kind of response that we have received is excellent. And we are looking at issues of AI resources, the 4 resources which are obviously, we're talking of compute, we are talking about data sets, we're talking about models and talent, and obviously overarching governance issues across these 4 AI resources. And the reason I suppose that we are looking at these AI resources is the fact that the benefits of AI would need to flow across to all people so that no one is left behind. At present, obviously there is some amount of skewness in these resources. So we're looking at how to ensure that the AI resources would be available both in terms of access and affordability. So I'll stop here, and I'm happy to get into details, but maybe I'll stop here for the present.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Garg. Maybe Debjani, and I should have actually pulled back a little bit in terms of the context of AI as well in Global South, and maybe that's where you start before speaking about the priorities of the working group that you are leading. A little bit in terms of, this is the first one that India is hosting. It's the first Impact Summit that's coming from Global South. How is India seeing it? And then perhaps dive into the working group priorities.
Thanks, Archna. So, there's been around 4 global AI summits, right? And the first one happened in UK, and that was focused on safety. And out of that came the concept of safety institutes, which a lot of countries have now picked up. Then you had Korea, then Paris last year hosted the 3rd AI summit. And they called it the AI Action Summit, right? And the focus was on action, and the focus was also, I think, a large part of the takeaway from Paris was about the concept of control of AI came out pretty strongly. What India is doing, this is the first ever AI Impact Summit, and I want to make that very clear, right? We have very consciously decided that we are going to shift the narrative to impact creation. And I think that's a shift that is needed globally in the AI narrative. We've been talking for so long about the promise of AI, the potential of AI. I think there's a strong need for a shift towards actual impact creation, ROI from AI. And I think India is sending out a very strong signal by calling this the Impact AI Summit and focusing it on impact. And I think it's right that the country like India, and especially representing the Global South, is talking about impact, because that is so important for us. With the kind, with our population, with the urgency, we have to ensure that we see the results in terms of both economic development as well as social development. So I think it's the right focus. I completely agree with it. And actually, that's the focus of the working group that I have the privilege of co-chairing, which is about economic development and social development. And my co-chairs, really thrilled to have co-chairs from Netherlands and Indonesia. So as you can see, it's a very 360 representation of what impact means across mature countries and developed countries and developing countries. And we have nearly around 40 countries participating, a number of international institutes. And it's fascinating to see that despite the diversity of participation, the common thread that runs across our dialogues, our debates, our discussions is that the time has come for us to really focus on impact. It is going to be challenging, and this is where collective action is an absolute must. So collaboration, cooperation, collective action is a must. So what our group working committee is looking at is how do we unlock the pathways to accelerate the journey towards impact creation across countries, wherever they lie on the spectrum of development, right? So how do we unlock very inclusive pathways for accelerating the development journey? And I'll talk more about it later, but that's the focus.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debjani. And maybe coming to you, Marisa, from your perspective, you're a co-chair to the empowerment as well as the working group that focuses on social good. How are you seeing the priorities and, more from maybe a global north to global south, but AI is going to impact the entire world. So it'll be good to get your perspective.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me for this panel, but also to co-chair this very important working group. Let me start by saying that I think it's wonderful that India is organizing the next summit, and that the word impact is absolutely vital and crucial, and I think that's what we need. And I think also India has proven that they can use technology actually to have social advancement, to actually use it to the benefit of all. And also I think India has shown that they can organize very complex, very big summits like they did for the G20. So I think we're all very happy that it's their turn now. You've shown leadership. You've shown leadership also how AI can be used to transform, I think, and also how the Global South can leapfrog. And I think therefore we are looking forward to the leadership of India. I think our working group is making good progress. I think we're looking for very practical ways on AI commons, on how we can have best practice exchange, how we can use an award to incentivize, to actually encourage new and innovative ways. So I think I'm looking forward to the outcome. We have an ambassador at large who is actually taking the lead from our side as a co-chair. He will be visiting in the beginning of January. So I think these coming 6 weeks, or maybe 8 weeks it is, I think, until we will have our AI summit, are going to be exciting. Our Prime Minister will come, he will be here, he will bring a few CEOs, because what I think is also very important, and India is taking the lead, is not only government to government, but also make sure that you have industry on board, that the CEOs are taking part in this endeavor, but also, of course, always research and the knowledge institutes. That's what we need, I think. And so we will be there with a good delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. So exciting. Mr. Garg, coming back to you in terms of democratizing AI, what can one practically, so yes, you will have lots of conversation with many countries. We know that issue of access is there, the issue of democratization of data plus AI, infrastructure, and then services and capacities. What can we really expect coming out of your working group?
So we are looking at as you mentioned, looking at these 4 basic foundational AI resources and what kind of design principles are required going forward. And during discussions, there are a few which I would just like to mention. Obviously, we are still working on a possible kind of a charter for diffusion of AI, if I can put it that way. Which would help guide future work in this sector. But if you look at on the compute aspect, maybe some kind of a compute discovery and access platform, whether that can be worked out and what could be the broad principles behind that. On data sets, one important observation has been the need for multilingual and multicultural data sets. So how can there be AI-ready multilingual data sets and what needs to be done to get there? Then when we talk of models, while we do have large models, but increasingly it's also seen that small models or domain-specific models is something which can help and give focused benefits at the edge or wherever they are placed. So that's another area that there are some suggestions come and that we hope to work on. I think one area where a lot of work has been done, and the fact remains that we need to disseminate the best practices across countries. And partnerships and collaborations and cooperation across countries would be essential to ensure that we don't try and reinvent the wheel every time. So, and that those best practices can be in terms of skilling, it could be in terms of models, it could be in terms of data sets or any. So I think that was that's one important area that we've been discussing. And more broadly, to expand this, what kind of a collaborative consortium mechanism can be thought of? So that is something which would really help to kickstart AI use in those countries where it's not so much prevalent, and in others to really further develop it. And the last point, if I can put it, is that we need to recognize that there are a number of stakeholders. It's the countries, the international organizations, the philanthropics, the private sector, other civil society organizations. So what kind of blended financing mechanisms that can be considered, which would help, depending on the context and the stage, what can be done. So these are some of the principles that we've been discussing, and let's hope that we are able to move forward on that.
Very practical segments that you've spoken about. I'm sure that you're going to get many questions on those, but I'm really excited that these are very concrete steps and not necessarily discussions in terms of, okay, let's just have collaboration. So, and that's what we had seen in G20, very action-oriented agenda, and that's what we are expecting out of the AI Impact Summit as well. Debjani, if I can ask you, in terms of, you spoke a lot about impact, right? What does impact really mean when it comes to the working group that you lead? What can one expect, if you can throw more light on that?
Yeah. Well, as Secretary Garg, the work he is doing to democratize all the critical resources, I think that's the biggest unlock we need for creating impact. So may the force be with you. I hope you're able to absolutely do what you've set out to do. I think that's the biggest need today, right? How do you democratize access to critical infrastructure? What we are looking at is assuming there is that foundation, there is access. How do we now figure out the pathways to turn our investments in artificial intelligence, how we use artificial intelligence or other technologies to solve real problems and solve them at scale. Now, funnily enough, you asked what impact means. In our group, the definition of impact per se differs from country to country. Everyone has a different way of describing impact. But if you break down the problem and you sort of break it down into smaller problems, and you see that at the heart of it, it's really about return on investment. It's about, are we doing enough to change lives? Are we creating livelihood? Are we increasing productivity? Are we improving healthcare? Are we improving education, right? So these are the questions that countries are answering. So we are looking at both. I think it's very good that we are looking at both economic development and social development, because you cannot do one without the other. Then you make it worse. So while these technologies have a critical role to play in augmenting productivity, and productivity is what gives you the economic growth. Right? So augmenting productivity, how do we ensure it's not happening only the white-collar workers or the top-line jobs? How do you ensure that this also percolates, diffuses to the grassroots levels? For example, in India, you have nearly 4.9 million informal workforce. Right? That's 90% of India's total workforce. And no one ever talks about technology for that sector. So how do we ensure that as we are talking about economic growth, it's not just about GDP, but it's really about per capita. We're talking about per capita GDP, because then you bring everyone into the conversation and you start thinking about what does productivity look like across the pyramid, from top to bottom. So that there's a lot of work going on to think through some of these things. And I think what we have, it's really about institutionalizing the processes for collaboration. That is, if we can do that, then you are going to see the impact carry forward. So it's really about that. It's how do you create the processes which will last way longer or beyond the summit. And what we are looking at is, one, how do we create sort of curation or there's so much of good work happening across countries. And as we discuss in our group, every country has a story to tell about what they have done. Unfortunately, even within this group of 40 countries, 39 are not aware of what this one country's done, and it's always an aha. Oh wow, you have done this. So how do we break that? How do we break the silos and move from silos to scale by creating that awareness about the good work that exists across the world? And not just what you have done and what impact you have created. In fact, one rule we have is we are not going to call them use case repository, which is what the term everyone uses. We are calling it the impact stories, because there's no point talking about just solution or innovation unless it results in real impact. So we are showcasing the kind of impact that technology can create and adding to it tools that will help countries scale and replicate. So that's one part of it, which is the commons that Ambassador referred to. And the second thing we are looking at is, I think it's time, so far there have been a lot of awards for innovation. I think it's now time to shift the focus on recognizing impact creation and recognizing it at a global level. So we are also thinking about establishing almost sort of the nobles of AI impact. A really well-respected global award or recognition system to recognize countries that do the best job of using this technology to create real impact. So those are the two things that we're working on.
Yeah, thanks. As the legacy continues because this Impact Summit will have, it will move to another country, and I think recognition at a global level and some of the ways that you're thinking about in terms of institutionalizing impact is going to be super significant along with rewards as well. So Marisa, from your perspective, what do you think the role of international stakeholders and international partners is going to be when it comes to this, either the working group or the Impact Summit? How can they play a role, and what role are you seeing countries play at this point in time? The success is only going to be when everybody sees themselves and joins hand in advancing the priorities.
Yes, well, it's absolutely crucial. I mean, we have to do it together. It's a fairly new technology. If I look at my own country, I could see that 2018-19, we started regulating, thinking about it, discussing. A lot has happened ever since. And it's also a general purpose technology. It's like electricity, it's like the internet. It's across sectors. It's a great opportunity, I think. We can do so much good with AI. It was mentioned already, like in healthcare, for example, or in agriculture, in many different sectors. We can do an enormous amount of good, but there are also risks involved. And so we have to make sure that we take the opportunities, that we also look for making sure that everybody can be connected, that there's equity involved as well. I think that's also high on the agenda. But I think we also have to look at the risks, always. And I've been ambassador at NATO. I was working in our Ministry of Defense. So I was also a little, well, what's the best word? We were all watching it closely, because on the one hand, also in the military domain, it has great opportunities. You can do so much quicker analysis of certain threat situations, so there is also a great opportunity for your whole defense system, but there are also huge risks involved as well. So I think we can only do this together. We can only sit together, talk about it, see where we make sure that we can take all the opportunities that are there, that we actually share that with the rest of the world, but that we're also vigilant for the risks involved. And therefore I think we have to join hands, and therefore we need these kind of international platforms to make sure that we address the right issues at the right time.
Mr. Garg, the opportunities as well as challenges, democratization can help bridge the inequities, right? But at the same time, you're at the heart of data as well. You've been at the heart of technology. You've been at the heart of data now. The different roles that you played in the country. Tell me, how are you thinking about normalizing some of these risks as well? Because this is going to be a pertinent issue that is going to be raised at every level in the summit.
So, the risks are there, and I don't think anyone can deny it. But the risks, I suppose, with any change, there are always opportunities and there are always risks. So I won't dwell on the opportunities aspect, but the risks are of different types, if I can put it that way. There are safety issues, security issues, issues of ethics. And broadly, if I can put it in maybe these three areas. And perhaps there would be no one way to handle these risks. There are some risks which can be handled by the use of technology itself. And those risks are something which, it's like running on a treadmill. You need to keep running just to stay where you are. So So a lot of the technology will change. It's dynamic, and this dynamism itself will have both its positive and negative. The second way of handling some of these risks would be through shared protocols and practices which are across countries, across agencies, across organizations, and that would be another way to handle some of these risks. And there are obviously the higher order risks, if I can put it, risks of ethics, and there would be obviously need for regulation. And I hope I'm not doing anything. It's when I speak. So there are risks of ethics and which would need. Maybe I'll change my mic. There would be risks of ethics and there would be need for regulations, of course. So I think it would be a combination of this, but at the same time, we need to recognize that that any technology has risks. So that shouldn't deter us from making use of it because the benefits perhaps outweigh those risks by a mile. And given the fact that the changes that it can bring in, the impact it can have across sectors, I think we need to keep that in view.
We ourselves are a great believer of technology for social good, and completely agree with what you've outlined. Yes, we need to understand the risk, but at the same time, the opportunities that technology, AI can bring, improving lives of people is significantly important. Debjani, I'm going to ask you, again, you spoke about institutionalizing some of the efforts of the working group. If I'm going to ask you, saying, okay, summit, and you also said summit is a point in time, and then you would want the work to be institutionalized and deliver impact. If I'm to ask you, 6 months down the line, what is your wish? What do you see that the summit would have accomplished? How do you see, maybe even speak of India in terms of carrying forward the promises that you would have made in the summit or the working group?
I think if we can achieve a pivot in terms of how governments, institutes, etc., are thinking about impact creation. For example, if we can see the needle move from pilots to scale, impact at scale, deployment at scale, that itself is a big change, and that's something we're pushing very hard for, is how do you ensure that you build for scale? And DPI is one of the best examples of that, right? So, and we've shown that it's possible. Yeah. So how do you build for scale? How do you collaborate? For example, this the aggregation of impact stories that we are trying to bring together. One key success metrics is, does it continue to grow, or does it sort of perish, or does it just stop, it just stays where it is? And if it continues to grow, are we able to build a community around it where people are collaborating to solve for specific problems? Hey, if a country puts out there, hey, I have a problem, I need to figure out how to, increase yield of my XYZ crops by X% because it's critical, or whatever the problem is. And then other countries start responding to say, hey, this is what we've done, or this is what we've tried. So how can we create that community where people are willing to share information, real-time information, collaborate? So I'm sort of looking at, again, I'm breaking down success into very small elements and looking at real, measurable, tangible differences that can be made. The award itself, it's not just about the recognition, but it is about more and more countries willing to talk about the kind of work that they have done, making it visible, right? So I think if we can start making more and more impact stories from around the world visible, if we can start building communities around these stories which lead to higher sharing of knowledge, collaboration, etc. And ultimately, it's an idea we are still debating, but maybe, there is a need to come out with some sort of impact measurement framework, which means the same thing for everyone. And that will be pretty amazing. Then how do you apply that, and how do you sort of see the index changing as you move along? So these are, the thought process that's now going on, and hopefully in the hybrid meeting we'll be able to finalize quite a few of these.
Thank you. And Marisa, my last question to you before we wrap up and open up for questions from the audiences. The voice of global majority, right? The AI we know can be inequitable, whether in terms of the algorithms or the outputs, or even in terms of access, right? How are you seeing this working group that you were co-chairing help create that bridge, that equity between the demands that exist within the global south and what can be delivered realistically from your working group or from the summit?
That's always a good question. Let's see if it works. Is it working? That gives a bond, no? Yeah, so it's always a good question for any summit, I think. But I think what a summit does, it actually builds a global platform where we actually meet and where we discuss and where we go from silos to scale. I think that's what you said, where we actually reach out and where we are bringing where we are bringing different ideas and different concerns maybe together into one agenda, and that's what we're doing, I think. I do hope that somehow by bringing in business and industry and bringing in research institutes and having all these governments around the table, we are working as the Netherlands together with India on the key enabling technologies. So I'm sure that there will be really good ideas where we can put funds together, where we can do research together, where we can publish maybe articles together or unite universities or exchange students. Or I really see it as a platform where many ideas can flourish and where we can discuss and align policies maybe. We were talking about the opportunities, and the opportunities are in scaling, I think, and are making sure that everybody can take part in the benefits and the opportunities, and the risks you were talking about, regulation. I also think transparency is very important to mitigate the risks. And I think we can share our concerns, because you are actually chairing the democratization working group, which is about how do we make sure that we can all benefit. But maybe it's a personal concern, but now that I have the microphone, let me share it with you as well. I'm also sometimes concerned about how AI can undermine our democracies. What we see nowadays on people not believing anymore what's real, what's unreal, how you can actually manipulate any news fact, and that's something I hope will also be discussed, because it's a negative impact of AI, and we should really mitigate it in also to protect our elections, I think. So this is a personal note, but I do think that creating such a platform under the leadership of India, with their enormous experience in actually using technology for the good of everyone in your country, I'm really looking forward, and I think there will be a lot of very concrete outcome as well.
Thank you so much. And with this, I'm going to open up for questions. Please raise your hand, state your name and the organization, and go to the question straight away. So that, and if you have a question for a particular panelist, please go ahead and ask. Maybe here, we start here and then we can move to the center.
Yogesh from Honeybee Network. Debjani, I've got to thank you for articulating so well the impact priority and the bottom end of the pyramid, considering India is such a big opportunity in the rural ecosystem, and that's the space we are focused on. A couple of examples that you said are maybe prototypes, are initial case studies or impact options that you've been prioritizing that could then be taken to scale, if you could just share in maybe agriculture and healthcare. And Archna, at Gates Foundation, you do a lot of work at the grassroots levels. If you could just elaborate places where you see with the work that's been done, which is specifically AI enabled, which can be scaled up, but is impacting large rural communities.
So we have sent out the RFI for impact stories to all countries, and it's in the process of coming in. So once we have got all the impact stories in and we are able to curate, then I'll be able to share what kind of stories is going to go out there. But just based on the discussions we are having, I think you're going to see a lot of stories in areas like agriculture, education, healthcare, social development, sanitation. So you're going to see a lot of stories in these areas, which are priorities for most governments, right? So I think you will see a diverse, and that's our goal, to really have a diverse set of stories out there. But right now we're in the process of getting all the inputs, and once we have it, we will definitely curate.
And from our perspective, we are seeing uses across the sectors that we work in, whether it's health or agriculture, education as well. If I would start to say what are these use cases in the case of agriculture, already farmer advisory in terms of whether it's the weather pattern, whether it's in terms of pest control, and all that, and even in healthcare, it'll be healthcare advisory, but all in all to say that India has built such a fantastic infrastructure, which is the public infrastructure on and digital access that has been created, which is allowing the data flows in an open way, which then enables AI to build models. And even in terms of the work that's been done in when it comes to languages as well, our work with different partners can only catalyze that further. Thanks a lot. That's been a great question. Thanks. Maybe the lady, yeah.
Okay, I'll just. Hi, this is Neil this side. I am with InMobi right now. It's India's first unicorn. So my question is to Saurabh sir. So with the focus that the government has started putting on regulation of technology, and still the government wants to go to the path of deregulation, what do you think becomes the role of a concept like regulatory sandbox when it comes to AI? And I think one of the best examples that we have in the country is in Telangana, where the T-Hub was the best example of how a regulatory sandbox facilitated AI coming in and a lot of impact across various sectors. So whether we are going on similar lines at a country level, or what kind of a regulation approach India is going to take?
So on sandboxes, I can say that I think in different sectors, sandboxes are being experimented. You might be aware of UIDAI, Aadhaar, that has a sandbox. Why I'm mentioning it associated with that at that stage. The RBI has set up the RBI Hub, the Innovation Hub, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, focused on sandboxes. And as you mentioned, Telangana and so many others. And I think that's the way to go, because one step before sandboxes is the large number of hackathons that happen. We have the Smart India hackathon, which happens every year, where you have thousands of students focusing on looking at how different aspects of technology can be used. We at the Ministry of Statistics have run a few hackathons to experiment how insights from data can be drawn. So I think that's an area where across the country, across departments, ministries, states, that's a focus. And I think the focus is also of the government is on ease of doing business. But at the same time, regulation is required in certain areas. It's always a balance between ensuring ease of doing business and regulation, and that balance is always it's a tricky balance. But over time, I think every country gets to that balance. But sandboxes for development of new, whether use cases or impact stories, I think that's something very high up on the agenda.
Debjani, do you want to add something from the Frontier Hub perspective, the work that you're leading?
Yeah, I mean, just on regulation, and while I think sandbox is a brilliant idea, but, you know, when you're dealing with the Frontier Tech Hub, we deal with the future of technology and how it's going to evolve, and then you get to see not just the opportunities growing exponentially, but you see the risks growing exponentially, right? And in this kind of a scenario, I think I almost think of regulation like brakes that we have in our cars. You do not want to drive a car without brakes or without faulty brakes, right? I think regulation does exactly, or should do exactly that, which provides you the safeguards to stop if you need to, so that you don't harm yourself and you don't harm others, right? And I think that's the approach we have to take to regulation. And hopefully, if you've seen the governance framework that NITI has just released, a few of us were on the committee that shaped that. I think that's been the approach we have taken, right, and tried to achieve that balance that Secretary Garg talked about. How do you create a regulatory framework that is pro-innovation, but at the same time it gives you the brakes to stop when you need to stop?
Very good evening. This is Nidhi and I'm a DPI researcher. Very happy to note how well represented and how diverse the entire agenda building of the Impact Summit has been. But one underrepresented and let's say not really known voice within the entire agenda is that of academics, is that of researchers. So as an academic myself, and especially when we're talking about impact of AI at large, so how do all of you see academics, socio-economic researchers in particular, take the outcomes of the entire summit or AI impact in general forward? How do you see researchers, especially socio-economic ones, because we see a lot of attention coming in for AI research from a technological standpoint, but from an economic or socio-economic impact standpoint, how do you see researchers taking the outcomes forward? Thank you.
Mr. Garg, and then
I don't know whether maybe I missed mentioning, and I think Debjani also. We should have mentioned that each of the working groups has one institution associated, one academic institution associated. For example, with the working group that I am leading on democratizing AI, we have, it always happens with me. No, I think it's okay. So, we have IIT Bhubaneswar associated, and I'm sure IIT Kanpur is with Debjani's group. So that's something that we have kept even in our stakeholder consultations. We have tried to reach out to different academic institutions who would be having interest, and not only on technology part of it, because the use would have impact across sectors. So let me assure you that we are not going to have academics, non-technology academics not associated.
And in fact, we have Professor Ravindran of IIT Madras heading a very important working group on safe and trusted AI. Right? So, I mean, you can't even think about doing this without all the three coming together. So,
thanks for clarifying. Yes, please. Can we have the mic moved around in the middle, please? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a PhD candidate at IIT Delhi in Information Systems. I'm trying to understand, is it too early to assess the impact? Because if I look at the Gartner Hype cycle, it goes through the different phases, right? And we are yet to reach to the disillusionment, trough of disillusionment, right? Disillusionment. So, because I do not know when I wake up in the morning what OpenAI will launch again, and then it will take some time to get adoption and measure the impact. So I'm wondering about that.
Well, AI for me is not ChatGPT and all these, they're wonderful tools, but that's not AI. AI exists from a long time back, right? And it really goes back to machine learning, deep learning, data analytics, predictive analytics, etc. And also when you're thinking, so one, there's been a lot of good implementation across the world that's happening, and it's not just AI, but you think about AI, IoT, etc., all coming together. They're solving some really, really big problems, right? Now the second thing is when you develop a assessment index, it can't be a fixed index. It can't be focused on measuring one thing and one thing alone. You have to factor in for phases, right? So we'll of course have to factor in for phases. We'll have to see how it, and I don't have the answer right now, but I know it has to be flexible and it has to factor in for a lot of things, and we'll think through all of that. But then again, let's not, I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is, AI is equal to the current AI. I would just refrain from using that. I know it's that's part of if you look at the overall AI portfolio, definitely the applications and the models, it's at the top, but then you have a lot going behind which has been existing for a long time. And you talk about enterprise productivity, etc., etc. It comes back to your ability to organize data, your ability to analyze data, your ability. So, all of these things have to get factored in.
Okay, so we have more questions than we can take. So I am going to close because we are at the end of the session. But I'm going to thank the panelists. But before I do that, yes, of course, I'm going to ask each one of you to say one word to describe either your working group or the AI Impact Summit, or a message for the audience. What the question that I wouldn't have asked or they wouldn't have asked. Go ahead, Mr. Garg.
The AI impact may not be the summit itself, but how AI can be revolutionary in terms of impacting people. I think that's something I look forward to.
Thanks. This one is working, right? No, I realized sitting here in this panel that actually the summit is the end of a whole process of 2 months where we're going to meet each other in these kind of panels and gatherings, and where we're going to meet in working groups where you're working together. And I think that whole process is it still working? I think AI is telling us that it's over, right? That the panel is finished. No, but I thought that this whole process of 2 months where we're going to meet each other in the working groups, and there's a lot of international exchange already, where we have the research institutes connected to our discussions. I think these 2 months will be so important, and maybe even more important than the summit itself. But I'm looking forward to the journey, and thank you so much.
Let's try it. Does this work? Okay. So you said that's the end. I have the exact opposite view, where I think for me it's the beginning, and it's the beginning of a new narrative. It's the beginning of new behavior, where we will hopefully which India will lead or pivot the world to think more about actual impact creation versus just the promise and the potential of artificial intelligence. So for me, it's the beginning of a new change or a new era.
Thank you so much to my panelists. The beginning of the new era of artificial intelligence. What a great way to start, or a great way to end the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, dear panelists, for indeed a riveting conversation on the AI Impact Summit. May I now request all panelists to please photograph? Yes. Thank you.
Our next panel is titled AI Impact Stories, where AI meets people. This panel will spotlight human-centered stories of AI applications across education, health, and agriculture. Panelists will share their journeys from early pilots to large-scale deployment, reflecting on key friction points such as user adoption, ecosystem readiness, interoperability across local contexts, sectors, and regions, and challenges in accessing and utilizing datasets. Through accounts of real-world impact and lessons learned, this panel will offer valuable insights into the practical realities of deploying AI solutions that genuinely benefit communities and transform lives. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage for this panel, Thiago Racher, co-founder and chief executive officer, Litras, Benjamin Mwalimu, head of technology, Jacaranda Health, El Mehdi Abul Manudel, co-founder and chief executive officer, Deep Leaf, Kidist Tesfaye, founder and CEO, Yen Health. Moderating this session is Kezom Masli, director, AI Hub and head of digital and AI programs, UNDP. Can I have the video, please? Thank you. Could I ask everyone to settle down, please? Kezom, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. And I don't know who didn't feel like dancing, but that was an amazing video. Welcome to everybody, and what a thrill and pleasure it is for me and all the panelists to join you here to talk about impact. We've had such a fantastic conversation over the last 2 days. Really, what's fantastic is that we've been waiting for the last 3 years to talk about impact, and that the upcoming AI summit is about impact, is what is bringing a lot of conversions across global north, global majority, development organizations, private sector, different countries, because we know that the world around us is shifting, but it is also creating some really unique opportunities. And we are here to talk today about some of the opportunities that are coming from the ground, from across many geographies. And I am thrilled that the star of today's panel are these amazing innovators from across the world. On stage we have Thiago from Brazil. Thiago, please put your hand up. Thiago, he's been solving this teacher-student ratio to help improve student writing and literacy. And he's been on a fascinating journey across as an investor and an entrepreneur, leveraging networks for exponential change. And just in the last panel, we heard about what may we do to institutionalize some of the networks where the impact that are emerging can be exponential and global in nature. We also have Benjamin from Jacaranda Health, and he's been bringing AI to serve the needs of mothers at scale in health. We also have Al Mehdi from Deep Leaf from Morocco, operating in a number of countries and helping farmers increase yield and reduce pesticides. And then we have Kidis from Zene Health in Ethiopia and Rwanda, looking at the supply chain solutions for healthcare providers to reach the remotest communities. And as you can see, this panel is about people. We'll certainly talk about AI, but it is about AI plus people. And it is about how that thrilling combination creates that safe, impact at scale. Now, all of them are on stage because they've moved beyond the pilot stage. Zene Health, 50,000 women and growing. Jacaranda Health serving 1.8 million mothers. And Benjamin, you're going to correct that number shortly, if it's more than that. Deep leave across 1 million hectares across a number of countries. And Tiago, you'll have to tell us what your number is. So I'm going to turn to you, and across my panel members, if you can just give us a sense of what has been your journey from 0 to 1 to exponential scale. How hard has that journey been? Where are the users in that journey? But also, can you talk about where is AI in that journey? Tiago, over to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored. So telling a little bit about our journey, it's important to give some context. In Brazil, just 1 out of 10 adults can be considered fully literate, can read a high school book or write a 1-page dissertation. So it's a huge, huge problem. And when we try to understand where the problem is, obviously it's inside the school. And what we notice very clearly is that students, they don't have the chance to write regularly. And we know that the only way for you to learn how to read and to write is to practice, meaningful practice. And they don't have that opportunity. And when they have the chance to write, they don't have feedback. So that's a huge issue. And that's the problem we try to solve right in the beginning, 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, we look at that problem and we tried to figure out how to solve it. And we didn't think about AI. We didn't think about technology, to be honest. But when we noticed and understood the problem they were trying to solve, the problem was that teachers were overloaded with work. They didn't have the time, the energy, and the compensation to really focus and spend time doing the assessment, the grading, and the support the students needed. So by then, we understood that technology could play a huge role in that process. So what we did was to develop our own AI back in 2015 that could really understand, comprehend students' writing, and give meaningful feedback right away. So that process of really understanding students' gaps and giving them clarity about what they have to focus allowed them to really improve their writing skills very, very quickly. So we started back then in 2015, 2019. We had the chance to run an RCT funded by JPAL, the lab at MIT, founded by Abhijit Banerjee and Serra do Flor, Nobel Prizes in Economics. And that RCT proved that our program really helped students improve writing skills very fast at scale. So after that RCT in 2019, we started to be demanded by governments in Brazil to run our program as their official writing and literacy program for students' skills development in literacy. So we've been scaling that program since then. We have covered and supported more than 4 million students since then, working as public policy, official public policy in different states and cities around Brazil. And right now we're looking for an international expansion. We're exploring new markets that could fit our program to their needs. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what our journey looks like.
Tiago, thank you so much for sharing. Can I probe you a little bit and ask, was there a problem in unlocking data? Did you have issues with access to compute? What about the linguistic and cultural diversity of Brazil?
Mm-hmm. That's a very core question. So back then, we didn't have data. We basically didn't have data. But we had something that was really special. We have a national exam in Brazil for the end of high school. And at the end of high school, they have a writing piece. They have an essay. And that essay is a huge data set. However, it was all manual. And at the time, there was no OCR. So what we did, we hired a lot of masters and doctorate students from the linguistics department of many universities for them to type the essays and start making linguistic notations so we could start identifying the standards, the patterns of those essays. And that was the initial data set we had. And once we had the students write on our platform, we started to make this corpus richer and more relevant. So it always started very small, very manually, and now obviously we don't have to do that anymore, but we still need the human piece improving and indicating to our AI what we have to do to be more precise, to be more assertive, and to give a better feedback for our students.
Tiago, thank you so much. We're going to come back to you, and I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions. Almadi, I turn to you. Tell us about your journey from Morocco to Bangladesh to Kenya. What are you doing, and how are you building these use cases for impact?
Thank you very much for having me here. So Deep Leaf journey started 3 years ago when we had the first yields lost due to pests, a pest attack on our tomato greenhouse in my hometown. The pest was Tuta absoluta, which is a flying pest insect that makes mines inside the tomato leaves. So farmers were confused how to treat this pest. Many agro dealers were taking this opportunity to sell their pesticides. So the farmers ended up using excessive pesticides. They had a lot of residues and they weren't able to sell their produce anymore due to the regulations. Some farmers were exporting. They weren't able to export due to European regulations. So my father was one of those farmers, and that's where I had to come in and create a solution that will help farmers reduce chemicals. So we created a simple deep learning model using ResNet, which is an open source algorithm. We trained it on the images of this pest, and then we've been able to identify the early signs and provide organic treatments and preventive measures instead of chemical pesticides, because at the early stage of the detection of the pest, you're able to use these solutions, these alternatives. And then it worked, and we thought, why not scale it into multiple crops? We found that there were already many startups doing the same, but the AI models were fragmented. Every country develops AI models for disease detection for some crops that they have in their fields. Farmers need to do crop rotation, so they need to install other AI models. So you find a farmer mobile phone filled with different apps, different mobile AI models. Each one is specific for some crops, and each one has a different user experience, and so on. And as you know, smallholder farmers, who are 80% of African farmers, can't actually learn every user experience. They can't even learn one of them. So we had to unite all of these crops under one AI model. We won some competitions where we got access to open data with the FAO. We trained the AI model on 57 crops, and now we are offering one API that allows you to detect 1,000 pests, disease, and nutrition deficiencies under one mobile app. Now we are in front of another challenge, which is affordability, making this affordable and accessible by smallholder farmers. So the solution for it is compute, and thanks to different initiatives, we've been able to access this compute, and now we provide it free for all the smallholders in Africa, currently at 5 million smallholders. And in order to unlock this growth, because farmers, even if it's affordable, you want to be able to reach them via social media or digital marketing means. So we pivoted from a mobile app into an API that integrates with existing platforms. And that's where collaboration comes. We started collaborating with different agri-tech companies from different countries of Africa and Middle East, integrating with their platform, enhancing their value proposition by adding this disease detection feature. And then we started discovering that this AI doesn't only diagnose and provides treatment, but it's fixing a huge food security problem that allows us to have use cases with governments, with banks, insurers, more segments in the market that we never imagined before. The first use case, which is the most important, so I can keep it short, I'll talk about it. It's the food security grants that governments provide to farmers so they can have access to treatment and fertilizer. The first customer was Qatar. There was a Deloitte report showing that 70% of their funding that goes to tenders and grants to get fertilizer go in for the wrong treatments, because the farmer doesn't have expertise or knowledge to discriminate between two different pathogens, because they have the same visual features. So they end up asking for fertilizer that's the wrong active ingredients, that have the wrong active ingredients. So the use case here is very simple. These mobile apps where farmers get access to treatment and fertilizer, instead of letting them manually choose from the list, they have to take a picture first, and then the AI will tell them which treatment they are eligible for. Then they get their voucher and go to the agro dealer to purchase. So that's how the journey been, from a problem that touched my community into a solution that feeds families in Africa, into a use case for food security programs.
Amazing, Almadi. Thank you so much for that illuminating journey. I now want to go to Ethiopia. Kidis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for having me and for joining us. So as mentioned, I'm from Ethiopia. And maybe I'll give a little context about Ethiopia for those that aren't familiar with it. So in Ethiopia, we're the second largest populous country in Africa. Fast growing population, fertility rates are quite high. And that's kind of where we come in as Yane Health, working on women's health. I know you mentioned we were in the supply chain earlier, but at the core of what we do is actually women's health and women's health commodities. In Ethiopia, when you look at the AI landscape, it's heavily government driven. This is government led. Since 2021, Ethiopia as a country has taken a commitment in being the AI hub spot for Africa and for innovation around AI and technology and improvement. So there has been a lot of investment and appetite from our government. However, private sector still has the strength in terms of innovation is coming from private sector. Use cases are coming from private sector. However, the regulatory landscape is still more favorable to government entities. So I think just with that understanding, it can show you as we're one of the ones that are in the health tech space that are trying to be a pioneer as a private sector actor and also build these use cases that are national priorities. For us at Yane Health, and I've kind of jotted things down, so I want to kind of share the journey in a way that can be useful for our discussion. AI doesn't start with a model. It starts with a young girl in her room on her phone, whispering or typing a question about, I'm pregnant, I don't know where to go, what do I do? How do I tell my parents? I think I may have caught an STD. What do I do? My menstruation hasn't been here for 2 months. Do I have a condition? It really starts with her problem, the stigma she's dealing with, and how do we provide that access for her where she feels safe. So I'm going to, again, focus on kind of the experience around women that actually use our products. We are, just like Thiago as well, we didn't start off as an AI company. In fact, we still aren't an AI company. We're a healthcare provider for women's health. And in our early days, it was really thinking about how do we solve problems around women's reproductive health. Maternal and child health is a big issue for most sub-Saharan African countries, if not all. And same like Ethiopia, there are 27 million women of reproductive age that still today have an unmet need for accessing contraception, for accessing care and learning about these topics. We're not teaching young girls about menstruation in high schools. We're not teaching girls about sexual health and so on. So by the time they're experiencing their first instance of pregnancy or a condition they have, it's usually the first time where they're going to a facility to get treatment for it, which is too late oftentimes. So that's kind of where we started. And I think the key thing around that is, for us, we have to remember that behind every tool and behind any solution, there is a person dealing with a problem. And that's kind of been the lens in how we started at Yane Health. So today at Yane Health, we are a mobile application that provides multiple features for women. We have an online, we have a mobile period and menstrual and pregnancy tracking feature on the app. We have an online educational portal where they can learn about SRH, sexual reproductive health, maternal health topics without stigma in their own language. And then we have an online telehealth service and online pharmacy, so they can access practitioners privately, discreetly, via video chat and audio, and also get prescriptions delivered to their home stigma-free and discreetly. Now within that, we have multiple use cases that we've kind of been piloting and trying in the last couple of years. We relaunched our app officially last year, actually, so we've seen fast, rapid growth in our app and uptake of women. But when we started, day one, we didn't have data, we didn't have an idea of what would be most efficient, and we really honed in on the human-centered design as part of our development with our product. So in the early days, we really gathered a lot of women for focus group discussions, we had online surveys, we gathered women in communities, we went to facilities to kind of talk to women and listen to them. We really listened. What is your problem? What are you experiencing in this? What are the gaps? And those early day discussions have really shaped to the use cases that we're prioritizing today. So again, with Ethiopia being a government-led and healthcare services are provided, over 80% of the market is provided by government in Ethiopia. So private sector doesn't have a stronger market share yet, and a lot of the data sits within government. And because Ethiopia is still at its infancy of AI, data privacy, data sharing policies, it's been difficult for us to get anonymized data from government as well to build AI models to help with our menstrual tracker or our pregnancy early detection and so on. So we've had to really start with the data that we had, and it wasn't much in the early days, right? We were dealing with thousands of data points, not enough, but it still was enough to understand what questions women were asking. We started an online a Telegram bot, chat bot, actually in our first use case with our AI chat, where we just were seeing how are women asking questions, what time are they asking questions, what languages did they prefer? Were they using emojis? Were they using different dialects? Which really helped us understand the human aspect of it. We even went into different regions to talk to women from different socioeconomic classes and tried to understand, what is their understanding of technology and AI. And interestingly, in one community we went to, women, it was a conservative region and community where they're very religious, and they felt like AI was evil. They really believed that, how can something that doesn't know me tell me what I need? And the fact that they were sharing intimate information about their sexual health, their maternal health, their reproductive health, they felt like it was going against their personal beliefs, religion, but also they were like, can I even trust the system? Is there somebody that actually can validate this? Is there a provider behind this? So we really got a chance to see it from that level of, there has to be a lot of advocacy done around what AI is, especially when you're providing healthcare services that requires trust at the core. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges first, is like, forget about the data and what we can build, but if the users don't feel confident in the system and the tool that they're using, we're not going to reach impact. Our AI model or any AI model can be 95, 99% accurate, but if the user doesn't feel trust and feel confident and feel like their information is private when they use it, there's really no impact that we're going to see. So I think that really helped us shape it. And also we went multiple times back to our platform on our app, on our bot, to redesign the app. We even, in fact, had a researcher do a human-centered design study on our UX and UI in terms of how do we engage, what is the tone of our messaging when we're talking to women about these topics. It can't be robotic and feel very static. It has to feel like there's a person behind there that actually cares. We had to change the tone of our messaging. We had to change, put in guardrails that won't say things that would impact or that would influence people based on their religious background or their cultural beliefs. So a lot of these things happened when we brought in the users into that, building the product. And today, where we're at, we're not at national-wide scale of our solution and our different use cases, that we're experimenting with. However, we have a clear path of how we need to build and what areas we have to really focus on as a B2C provider, where the end user really has to understand what they're using, and not really spending a lot of money on the technicalities of it, but really also focusing on the user experience of these tools. And I'm sure there's more questions we can unpack, but that's pretty much what we do. I guess in terms of use cases, like I said, on our app, we forecast and predict women's menstrual cycles. We also notify them on early danger warning signs for pregnancy challenges. We recommend different contraceptives or services if they're planning to conceive, or if they are planning to get on a birth control. We help them decide what's the best option for them based on the input that they use. So it's really personalizing their care. And also we're experimenting with triaging patients to our telehealth service. So really telling them who they should be talking to and speaking to quickly, but also in a way that is safe and that they understand. And we're always being responsive as well. So I mean, that's what we're doing today. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we always think about collaboration. We work closely with the government as well, leveraging their infrastructure and their resources. But the biggest thing that has got us this far so far as a startup as well has been the financing piece of it. You know, we want to be sustainable. We are a social enterprise. We're not an NGO. We need to ensure that this tool will also survive for a long term. So I think these types of things have been core to how we've built our tool so far.
Thank you so much, Kiris. And now over to you, Benjamin. Please tell us about Jacaranda Health and your journey.
Thank you for having me. And I'll start by correcting the number. We've served 3 million moms so far. We've served 3 million moms so far, not 1. Yes, not
3 million moms, okay.
Yes. So just to give a little bit of context of why Jacaranda does what it does. An average American woman will ask Google 1,000 questions during their pregnancy journey. But back at home in Kenya, our moms don't even have access to phones. They don't even have access to the internet. So anytime they want information, the closest place they can get this information is their friends. And I don't know about you, but if I took advice from my friends all the time, I'll probably be in jail right now. But yeah, so from that, we thought, how could we empower these women through their pregnancy journey and their newborns after they give birth? And just like Tiago, we didn't start with AI. We had a bunch of help desk clinicians sit, and we provided an SMS platform that moms could just ask us questions. And at that point, we were processing at least 100 questions a day. That's easy to handle, right? 2 people can handle that. But then two problems showed up. One, we had really benign questions being asked. And most of these came from culture and beliefs. Things like, can I eat eggs? Can I eat avocados during my pregnancy? And I don't think anyone wants to sit and answer 100 can I eat avocados question at work. It becomes boring. And the other thing was we could quickly see that those questions will easily move from 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 12,000, which we handle right now. We process 12,000 questions a day. And the question was, how do we serve the mom faster? And how do we make it easy for our help desk agents? Because again, we don't want to work with people who are bored at work because we are asking them if we can eat eggs during pregnancy. So that's where we started thinking about technology that we could use to at least help the help desk agents, the human help desk agents that were answering mom's questions. And at that point, our first hurdle came, which was moms in Kenya, and I think this has been mentioned a lot as something that happens here in India. There's no conversation that just has one language. When we are talking to each other in Kenya, we would mix mostly English and Swahili. And at that time, most LLMs were really good at English, but they knew nothing about Swahili. And the Swahili they knew was more like the university Swahili, which no one uses in their day-to-day conversations. So our first hurdle was to figure out how do we get a model that can understand Swahili that everyone speaks, And that's how we built, based on Llama 2, that's how we built Uliza Llama, which basically means Ask Llama. We trained this model with data that was given to us, at least by the government, and then for data that we had to hire people to translate, so manually, because at that time we also didn't have a lot of the tech for very good translation like we do right now. And then after that, from the previous questions that we had, where help desk agents were responding, we had at least 1,000 questions and answers. We used that as context for the things that we would expect our moms to ask. So that, in combination with policies and other documents from the Ministry of Health, the WHO, to give that model the context that it needs to respond to our moms. And that model we called Uliza Mama, which means ask a mom. So at that point, we had something that we thought worked, and we put it out to moms, and we quickly started learning that this is not what they wanted. Moms do not want, as much as you're giving them clinically accurate information, they do not want you just texting them without even saying hi. They do not want you telling them, a good example was given the other day, they do not want you telling them, you'll die, don't worry. No, they want you to be, to have some empathy when giving them this information. And we had to iterate and fine-tune the model for these specific things. And the other thing was we wanted to know if we are actually delivering value for these moms. And the only way to do so is to ask the moms themselves. I mean, you could do a bunch of studies around that, but if you're not talking to the actual user, then you're not necessarily getting the feedback that you need. And one of the things we added was making sure that after every response that we give the mom, we actually ask them if we're providing value to them. And that created a basis for what we want our model to do and how we want it to work. And over the years, we fine-tuned that to the point where now we're identifying risks in the questions that they're asking, and that's where we've still kept the human in the loop. Because we do not want a situation where a mom is portraying some risk in their pregnancy and still want a machine responding to them. So anytime we have danger signs, those are handled by still our human help desk, who would call them and direct them to, for referrals and how to seek further care. So I think that's the journey of Chakaranda.
Benjamin, thank you so much. Great stories, everyone. Thank you for sharing so generously with us. Benjamin, may I ask, you talked about making the model talk in Swahili and in spoken Swahili. Was there any voice and text database that you leveraged or contributed to? Second, I wanted to ask you about compute, because it's come up often as one of your critical scale challenges, and would love to just hear from you, for the audience, what that means.
We leveraged a lot of data that our partners, mostly the Ministry of Health and Education, had. The Ministry of Education helped us with Swahili text that we could use to train our models. And then the data set that we had collected before we started using AI really came in handy, because then moms texted at us a lot in Swahili. And at least the a million questions and answers helped us in that case. When it comes to compute, I think it's a challenge, like everyone else has mentioned, and we have had support from a couple of people, and Amazon and Google giving us credits to be able to deploy and run our models. But right now what we're trying to do is to now come up with frameworks and policies to set up that kind of compute in conjunction with the government in Kenya, so that we can also subsidize the costing, the unit cost per SMS that we send out. Because let's be real, credits won't exist forever. So we need to figure out how to be self-sustaining as organizations working with the government.
You mean how to not just access but also afford the compute?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we'll hear more about it in the next panel about
advisory that you are providing, and what are you doing for the language? Because in Brazil, advisory that you are providing, and what are you doing for the language? Because in Brazil and where you've started, is it just that, or there's a replication or an enhancement with the language set that you're doing?
So for our international expansion, we are in a phase where we are investigating where we should go based on different criteria, complexity, level of investment we need, the investment we're going to have to do in adapting our product, market dynamics, and so on. So it's a business plus technical analysis for us to make that decision. We are starting with Latin America because it's culturally very connected to what we have. In terms of curriculum, is also quite similar to other countries. In terms of language, Spanish and Portuguese are also very similar. But the plan, once we decide what country we should go, we will have first run a pilot to understand what kind of data we need. So we don't know in advance what kind of text types or essays or school segment we're going to work in. And once we understand, then we'll have to seek that data set, which it will be basically students writing, right? Our data set are students writing, and not only student writing, but students writing with a set of analysis that can give us the information about that data set. Probably we will have to hire, again, linguistics to help us understand very specific traits of those essays related to the rubric that we will have to give as feedback for the student. So we will be able to avoid that human capacity to really refine data set. Like the idea that you just have to, you know, we have an AI, generative AI, and then you ask GPT to like give me a feedback based on this kind of criteria, this rubric. It's just a mess. We have that experience that doesn't work. We really need a moment of refining students' data set so we can start working with precision.
Thank you very much for the question. So at Debrief, it's almost the same thing. We have this data X products flywheel. So the more data we capture, the more products we can cover, more crops. And once you cover more crops, you can cover another geography where farmers are cultivating that crop. For example, when we started in Morocco, we started with tomatoes because it was very obvious, because Morocco is exporting a lot of cherry tomatoes to Europe, specifically UK, Spain, France, and so on, and grape. So the second crop was grape. Once we developed this model in Morocco, the first idea was to look into every market where we have an opportunity of entry, where farmers cultivate tomatoes and grapes. And that's where we found that it's not the right approach, because we can't actually just go to any country on our own And most governments require you to register your company locally so you can work with them and so on. So we had to switch. Instead of trying to put our mobile app in the market and give it to smallholders, we have to create an API where local partners can do the implementation. So that's when we started partnering with large agribusinesses, with agri-tech startups, with insurance and banks who are interested in this solution, either in the diagnosis itself by subsidizing it to the farmers if it was a government entity, or by reselling it if it was an agri-tech company, or by just buying the data if it was an insurance or a bank. That's how we actually unlocked the expansion issue, and were able to also collect and co-build the data set with these partners on the ground. So, for example, when we went to Kenya after Morocco, the first thing we've done is collaborate with a bank there who already have many collaborations with universities there. They already have the data set ready. So we just captured the data, trained the AI, started providing diagnosis to farmers who are subscribed to the bank services, either getting loans from the bank or they are insured. Same thing in Qatar. When we met the food security program there, we had to train and fine-tune our AI on leafy greens and on zucchini and lettuce and palm trees. So again, we contacted the local universities, agronomic research institutions who have the data sets. We created a fine-tuned AI model on these crops, then started selling. We found out that this API approach works better because we are creating value for partners globally instead of trying to go directly to the farmers. Now for the linguistic part, since we are providing treatment recommendations in natural language, we had to make sure that it's adapted to the local language. We had to make sure that the farmer will understand the response that we are generating. And for our case, it's not only about translating it into the native language, but also making it contextualized, because not every country have the same authorized pesticides. Every country have its own index of authorized pesticides. So we had to not only translate, but also remove all the unauthorized active ingredients and replace it with the authorized ones, provide the right dosage, the right application, for example, how many applications, what is the delay between each, and what is the delay before harvest, so you can have 0% residues. So this work was possible thanks to the API approach, because when you have an API and implementing partners, these partners are localized. They already know what is the list of the authorized treatments. They already know the entire regulation around phytosanitary. So they share with us this list. We fine-tune our knowledge base. We remove all the unauthorized active ingredients, and then we are able to provide recommendations in that country. And thanks to this API approach, we are now able to provide our treatment recommendations in up to 50 different languages. And we don't have to redo it every time, because we just translate it one time, because it's a static knowledge base. Whenever you detect disease or pest or nutrition deficiency X, we give you the same response as we give to every other farmer who detected the same issue.
Great, we'll take one more question. My God, many hands are going up. How shall we choose? I've already made eye contact with you, so please go ahead.
Right, I didn't think this was working. This is working, yes. Radhika Mittal, Research Program Manager and Impact Lead for Ethics of Socially Disruptive Technologies. It's a Dutch ministry grant on understanding ethics. So I'm very curious because I hear, of course, for agriculture, maybe this is a bit different, but for health-related sectors, I'm glad that you're talking about the user ecosystem and building trust and building, tapping into beliefs and habits to collect data. But I'm wondering about the safety of the data sets that are gathered, and how do you kind of navigate that loophole, because this is becoming a big issue, right? Are there regulatory frameworks in place for you from your end as organizations? Because of course it's great for digital advancement and transformation, but it's when you go beyond business, how do you tackle user agency, autonomy and well-being while collecting this data and then protecting this data?
We have a volunteer. Benjamin, you're going to kindly answer, but I did want to preface before you come in to say that there was someone who raised the question of the involvement of academic institutions, especially academic institutions in the social sciences. And as we were workshopping across, figuring out some how to create safe impact at scale, how do we institutionalize networks where we can discover each other, solve problems together, or even help unlock what someone else needs that I can provide. And one of the challenge areas to scale that did come up was academic institutions that we need to work more closely with. Now, of course, there were a lot of institutes that were talking about steerability of models, benchmarking of models, and that is very important when we're talking about how these LLMs will work in Global South contexts. And India has been doing remarkable work in creating that linguistic diversity and context, and much of what these use cases are building become the commons inputs into these models as well. But there is this ongoing need to connect the dots with the rigor of the academic research and social sciences as well, that as a community we've really taken that away as one of our sort of must have, must include, must network better. So I just wanted to say that to you, and Benjamin, please.
Yeah, I think we've looked at this issue in a couple of ways. And the first and the big piece for us is having a clinical quality assurance team within the organization that allows us, helps us evaluate the data sets that we're using to train, and then periodically make sure that they're evaluating whatever the AI is giving out. Again, just to make sure that it's safe, but processing 6 million questions is also can be overwhelming for that team. So what we've done in addition to that, we're also using an LLM as a judge, where Lama would give us, or Ulizamama would give us the answer, but then would have GPT audit that answer for the things that I mentioned earlier. Does the answer greet the mom? Is the answer medically correct? Does it have empathy? How's the agent behaving within this answer? And one of the rules that we've set is for two things. When two things happen, the answers don't go to the moms direct. They have to be looked at by a human. One is when we detect a danger sign, and two, when we detect a danger sign, that goes to the human help desk, and two is when it fails audit. If you asked a question about avocados, but then it fails audit, unfortunately the human has to look at it. So that's around the data that we ingest and the data that we give out. But while building the platform itself, privacy is key. So one thing that we do is we do not collect data that we don't use. If we do not need your name just to answer your avocado question, we're not going to ask you for your name. And also, if you have no business accessing that data, then you do not have the rights to access that data. So we've built in privacy in our design for the platform. Yeah.
So I wanted to give my perspective. So at Deep Leaf, we are working on pest and disease images. Before processing these images, before training the AI on it, we start firstly with our agricultural team. It's led by my uncle, who's our chief research officer with 30 years of disease science, plant disease science, phytopathology. So we are making sure that the labels are correct of every disease that we have. Same thing for the knowledge base. Every active ingredient that we recommend goes through different tests before providing it to the farmer at the end. But that's not the issue. The data sets that we train the AI on can be curated, can be tested and filtered before doing the training. What companies cannot control really is the real-time input that the farmer gives them when we are doing the inference, during the inference. And there is a famous quote that we have in software development. I think it applies on every other field, which is garbage in, garbage out. If you give AI random data that doesn't fit, he will give you bad response, inaccurate response, and the AI itself won't be even able to find out and won't give you, he will still give you the response with high accuracy, with high confidence. So what we have done at Deep Leaf, we focus on that garbage in. We created a simple TensorFlow light model that runs offline on the mobile phone that tells the farmer in real time to get close to the leaf, position yourself correctly, clean the lens if the AI detects that there is some unfocus or there is no plant in the image, and so on. This is a solution that allowed us to have the perfect input for the AI. Once you have the perfect input, of course, you will get better response at the end. And once we implemented this, it was a year ago, we've been able to increase our confidence level with up to 96%. Most AI models, when they are classifying images now, they are limited at around 80% confidence. Confidence, not accuracy, which is very different. Accuracy is a metric that we get when we are doing the training, but during the inference, that's confidence, which is different. So at Deep Leaf, this is a solution that we've been using.
Thank you so much, Almedi. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to turn back to the panel members. We've had many aha moments over the last 2 days, but as Debjani said in the last panel, we're going to keep having aha moments because we'll come together in meetings or virtually or in person and we'll say, wow, I did not know you were doing this, even in the same country, even across borders. So I just want to turn to you guys, how do we continue collaboration? How do you continue collaboration in countries? How do we continue collaboration as a global network? What are some ideas or takeaways that you would leave us with before we close the panel? And Kiris, would you like to start?
Sure, I was just thinking about that. It's been
if you want more time, we'll put Tiago on the pedestal.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been a reflection, I think, for all of us since yesterday. There's a big challenge around collaboration and coordination, and I think it's not something we're going to answer today, but it's something we definitely will continue to think about. I think, from our journey, I think we've definitely seen that there's so much duplication of efforts into all of these use cases that we're building and interventions we're coming up with. And I think it really starts with first understanding and knowing who's doing what, right? Understanding who's doing what and who should play which role. Now, one thing in our country, in Ethiopia, the challenge has been, government should be an enabler for AI tools, creating policies that are enabling for private sector to engage and build and innovate and integrate. Interoperability is a big issue, but we don't have that. But now in our country, we're seeing government lead in building tools, which is undermining private sector to actually engage. And it's creating this almost toxic competition where at the end it's not impacting the users at the end. So I think based on, of course, where we are, there needs to be a clear understanding of, what role do we have? And I think even for our journey, when we started, again, we didn't start off as an AI company, but you want to, we all try to build these language models and different fine-tuning of models that somebody else is already doing. So I think before we start building, I think that should be all of our assignment, is to really think about who's already doing this that we can collaborate with and partner with and stop ourselves from reinventing that. Because I think I see that also in the conversations here. It's a similar thing. So I think if we think about taking that as a step to say, let's see what's going on and then plug in, see where we can plug in. Like I love the model, that you mentioned has helped, that has helped you scale with the API where you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So I think really being conscious about that. And I'll just say that I think the challenge is not technical, it's institutional. So I think we have to think about it on that perspective as well. I really think about how we can make it work. But again, it's something that we have to reflect on beyond this conversation to come up with something tangible.
Someone very rightly this morning said access to justice is a logistics issue. It's not a technology issue or a legal issue. Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, about this collaboration challenge, I'd like to say that this is my first time in India, the first time in a conference like this, and to see the way that the organizers and the people around made it happen, and the quality of the dynamics, the quality of the interactions is really, really impressive. I could never see this happening in Brazil, for instance. I think that collaboration in Brazil, we have a much higher challenge, a cultural challenge to understand what collaboration really means. Because in Brazil, at least, we see collaboration as a transaction opportunity, like what you give to me, what I give to you, rather than here, it seems like collaboration is clearly a requirement for a structural change. And I think that culturally speaking, you guys are way ahead of us, and we have lots to learn with you guys. So this has been an amazing learning experience for me. But going to collaboration and what I see and what I believe that can really lead us to impactful collaboration are two things. I think the first one is mission alignment. We do have organizations working with education, with equity and whatever, but at the end of the day, each one of them are looking for very specific problems, very specific challenges, and it's harder to connect to the same exact mission. And this mission is not only a concept, it must be a number, it must be a metric, it must be measured, it must be very, very clearly defined for all of us. So mission alignment and I wouldn't say incentives alignment, but incentives clarity. Because usually when we have different organizations working together and collaborating, they're seeking something different. And to make sure that that's transparent and there is a conversion of incentives is really important. And I think this is a way to start off a new collaboration, like our mission alignment, our incentives. Is there a conflict in our incentives, or they can really foster each other? So I think this would be like the first steps I would give to think about collaboration, systemic collaboration. And I think that for the problems that we're trying to tackle, there's no way of reaching scale, exponential change without collaboration.
Thank you so much, Tiago. Benjamin, would you like to go next, and then we'll close with you, Almedi?
Yeah, I think building on the incentives piece, I think one thing that would drive collaboration is funders and donors not funding the same things, and figuring out a way to connect people who are doing the same things and maybe fund them as a whole instead of looking at deliverables of the same thing from two different people or two different organizations across the continent. Because I think not just with AI-based tools, even just the traditional digital health tools, that's one of the things that has driven the fragmentation that we're currently seeing in the health sector.
Thank you, Benjamin. He's giving us something new to reflect on, but absolutely well noted. Almedi, over to you.
I want to build up on what the panelists said. From a technical perspective, I find that every time I go to an event, there must be someone who has strong synergy with what we are doing. And the issue that I find is priorities and focus. So we have a lot of synergies, but it's very hard to identify what is the focus that we should make in order to make this synergy produce something meaningful. So from a technical perspective, speaking of APIs, I see a lot of companies here or in other events who are providing something, but they are producing some data that they don't actually leverage and can be leveraged by the other companies around them. So I think one of the recommendations I would say is to share this information, try to do data exchange, because sometimes you don't know what opportunity relies in the data that you're gathering by doing what you're doing. But when you're sharing about what you do with other innovators in the room, they are able to find out that you have that data they are missing. Data can be anything. It can't be only images or text. It can also be ideas, entries to new markets, and so on. So I want to emphasize on this point, try to share as much as possible. Not everyone sees the world the same way you do. Maybe some opportunities that you see and you find irrelevant are relevant for others. So I want to emphasize on sharing, because sharing is caring, as they say.
Thank you so much to all the panel members. Very insightful. I'm sorry, audience, that we didn't have more time to take more questions. But our panel members will be around in the room and outside over tea break, so please take every opportunity to reach out to them. As Archna was saying in the panel before, the new AI era has started. It is the era of impact, and impact is going to be messy. It's not going to be perfect. Collaboration will be required, not just in an event or in a meeting, but as a continuum. So we're really looking forward to working together with everybody. For me, from the United Nations Development Program and the AI Hub for Sustainable Development, we're going to, looking forward to safe impact at scale, our new tagline. Thank you so much for making AI about people. A round of applause.
Thank you, panelists, for a truly insightful discussion. We now move into a conversation with, and please welcome to the stage, Sunil Wadhwani, President, Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence and founder, W Health Ventures. This conversation will be moderated by, and again, please welcome to the stage, Shalini Kapoor, Chief Strategist, Data and AI, Ekstep Foundation.
So welcome, Sunil, and thank you for being here, for being in India at this time, a very key time where a lot of AI conversations are happening. We have had like this for this summit, some workshops in the morning and even yesterday, and we listened to the panel before where Mr. Saurabh Garg, Debjani, and the ambassador from Netherlands, they were talking about the AI summit and what are the key things. So one thing which has come out is benefits of AI to all, right? No one is left behind, and the impact is about that how can we be inclusive? Now with your journey, it starts in the US, you're an investor, large companies, and here you have in India, Vadhwani AI, good amount of work reaching into in healthcare, getting deep into. So, walk us and, just let us know that what is the AI which can actually happen for someone in a tier 4 city in India, but maybe is also happening for the tech titan sitting in Silicon Valley, right? AI is happening at both the places. How do we make it for all?
Sure. Great way to start was start with a really tough question. Okay. And by the way, I should be sitting in the audience listening. There's been so much wonderful gyan coming out yesterday and today. I should be sitting out there receiving the gyan rather than trying to give it. In terms of equitable access to AI in a way that's inclusive, in a way that improves quality of life for people around the world, but particularly the global south, I think there's a whole range of things that are starting to be done. Applying AI to powerful use cases in healthcare, education, agriculture. We've heard a lot about this over the last couple of days. Interestingly, very few of the AI applications, these exciting, promising AI applications that have developed, have truly scaled, right? My guess is that 95 to 98% of these AI applications that have been developed in India and other places haven't scaled up. There are reasons for that, and if you like, we can get into those. Over time, though, I think we're all learning lessons as to what it takes to scale. So as an example, one of my lessons has been that when you're trying to identify or develop AI to attack a particular problem, it may be how do we reduce tuberculosis in India, the biggest infectious disease killer in the world, the biggest infectious disease killer in India. How do we use AI for that? Developing countries, including India, have a problem where there's a very high dropout rate in schools in very early grades. 7, 8, 9, 10 years old kids are. How do we use AI to help to keep them in school, to get them through? So these are some of, and like this, there are a whole range of issues that are starting to be tackled with AI. At my small AI foundation here, we're working on many of these. Many of these are being employed at scale. But the lesson I've learned is that the AI solution is only 30% of the answer. And 70% of the answer is figuring out how will this actually get deployed at scale in the field. A lot of these AI solutions which work wonderfully when we develop them, when you get out and you're trying to implement a solution for 1 million ASHA workers or 1.5 million Anganwadi workers or X number of school teachers in schools in tier 3, tier 4 cities, etc., that's when the problems start happening. So it's not just the AI, it's how do you integrate into government workflows, which very few of us understand who aren't in government. How do you understand the challenges of the frontline health worker, teacher, etc., etc.? And while we all claim that we pull them into the development kind of process, we really don't develop that. And that's the reason why most of these things don't scale up. As we learn these lessons, as we get better at executing, you will see AI will be a force for greater inclusiveness, for greater equity, for improving the quality of people's lives. Beneath this, though, I'd say there's a separate foundational issue which I haven't heard mentioned in this conference, and I don't hear mentioned at most AI summits around the world, which is that AI, we all know, and as we've talked about, it's going to be a gigantic tidal wave, right? We're at the very, very early stages of this. Next 10, 15, 20 years, highly disruptive in ways both good and bad. All of us in the developing world, in the global south, complain that all the models come from the West, data comes from there, they're biased, this, that, and the other. The challenge becomes to start developing our own capabilities. We need an academic ecosystem in AI. We need research ecosystems in AI. We need skills training ecosystems in AI. And there's relatively little talk about that. India is still, I think, way ahead of the curve for the global south. But when you go to other countries in South Asia, you go to other countries in Africa, very far behind. It takes time to think that through, to develop that, but until we start doing that, developing research programs, training programs, academic training programs, that is when we will start seeing more ideas, more solutions bubble up from the south rather than coming from other places. But all of that, as it develops, you will absolutely see more equity happening, more inclusiveness happening, etc. There are other threats coming down the pike that we can talk about later if you like.
Sure, absolutely. I think you talked about like only 30% happen, and they're not just AI centric. There is so much things around it to happen. So I remember, like, in 2020 when I wrote my book AI for You, the New Game Changer, it was considered a new game changer at that time, and I talked about the promise of AI, the fear of AI, and the confusion of AI. If you ask me, confusion is still there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? The fear is actually being fed by trillions of dollars. And the promise of AI is actually being converted into impact. And that's what the theme of the summit is. But I would like to hear from you, what's the best impact story which, like, you are proud of, and you say, it could be US, India, any region, but it's a good impact story which we think we can talk about.
I'll tell you, to me, the most impressive impact story I've seen in terms of AI applied for public good is India. Really is a story. I live in the US, I come to India often. In the US, even though all of the AI models are being developed there, trillions of dollars are going into data centers, etc., there is very little use of AI in the public sector. In the delivery of government services, it is, even in the education system, it is only just starting to come in. There are no national ideas in terms of here's how to use AI to improve education, to improve healthcare. So even the developed world, Europe, the US, is still trying to figure all of this out. The developing world, most of it is even further behind. I think in India over the last 10, 15 years, not just with AI, but with digital, we are coming a long way. We understand large-scale issues. We understand how to develop technology that impacts hundreds of millions of people. We've got all the usual examples of Aadhaar and UPI and now the tech stack, the health stack in India, etc. So I think in India we have a somewhat unique situation in the global south, where we have a national leader that understands the transformative power of technology and specifically of AI. We have people in the administration, in all the ministries, very open to new ideas and to how to use AI. We've got a public health and public education system which is becoming open to this, so as we develop solutions, they can be implemented. We're in the early stages of building an academic ecosystem for AI, research, skills training. So I give the government here a lot of credit, and of course we've got this whole ecosystem, all of us sitting over here who are part of this picture in making things better. So I think we are kind of the example to the world of kind of how to move on this. Now we are very early days, globally, in terms of the use of AI. So whether it's in the good side of AI, the bad side of AI, we haven't seen anything yet. I would say we're at the beginning of the beginning for this phase of AI.
Yeah, I think I'll probe you a little bit more on, see, we talked about use cases earlier in the day, that use cases happen in the vertical sectors. They happen in agriculture, in judiciary, in healthcare. But the AI use cases, they need a lot of horizontal unlocks. The unlock of language, the unlock of compute, of safety, of AI-ready data, of workforce reimagination who has to work around and actually make that use case successful, and you hinted to that. So if you can give an example of a use case which is either at scale or it's your favorite use case, right? So I would really like to know about that.
Sure, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples in different sectors that I'm somewhat familiar with. So as an example, I mentioned earlier this problem of this very high dropout rate in early grades throughout the global south. So here at Vadhwani AI, we got a call from the government of Gujarat about a year ago about this challenge, and can AI be used to address this in some fashion. We sent a team in because first you have to analyze the causes. Why are people dropping out? And we learned that the single biggest reason for kids dropping out early in school is a lack of ability to read proficiently in their mother tongue, in this case in Gujarati. If you're 8, 9, 10 years old, if you can't read properly in Gujarati, you struggle in literature, science, geography, science, all of the subjects. After a while, you fail a few exams and you say, why am I here? And you go home. So we've developed a suite of tools in the early childhood education space where in the space of 20 seconds, we analyze for each child exactly where they are struggling to read, which words, what are the patterns in the words that they struggle to read. We come up with a diagnostic for the teacher, for each child, and then we come up with a remedial plan. How do you help on a child-by-child basis to overcome the specific difficulties that they have? The pilot went so well that the government of Gujarat very quickly made this mandatory for all 3 million school children in Gujarat of this age. 3 months ago, the government of Rajasthan made it mandatory for all 5 million school kids in Rajasthan. In the next 6 months, this will be in about 10 states, and hopefully by 2027, it will be a national standard. Something like this, just imagine the impact. This is one use case, one solution, but imagine the impact this has on the tens of millions of school kids in India who come out every year. One example. Another example. Healthcare in India, right? We've got 1.4 billion people in India, roughly 1 billion people of that depend on the public health system. Your first point of contact for many people is a health and wellness center, and within that health and wellness center, it's the community health officer. 170,000 of them in India. Most of them aren't doctors. They have basic education, they're given training by government. The government called us a year ago and said, can you help them diagnose better, triage better, come up with treatment plans? We developed a rudimentary system, and it's very rudimentary, it's phase 1. A system to help these folks, again, when they see someone, they enter the 3 or 4 symptoms that they see in the patient. Our AI system tells them, here's the likely diagnoses, we give 2 or 3 choices, here's the questions you should ask, etc. This is now being used for over 10 million consultations a month, over 100 million a year. It's only in Hindi. You have to enter the data with your fingers. In 6 months, we'll have it voice enabled. In fact, in 2 months, we're going to have it voice enabled. In 3 or 4 months, we're going to have it available in 10 languages. And the government is telling us usage will go up 10x. World Health Organization is telling us this could be a global game changer. So these are, and I could give you 20 more examples, right? But these are the kinds of things that can have massive impact, not just in India, but we can set the example from here by piloting these at scale, implementing these at scale for the global south. And I'll tell you, there is a lot of interest. Over the last 12, 18 months, I've been invited by the UN and other folks to speak at conferences around the world. After each one, when I talk about what's being done in India by the government, by the social sector, the kinds of AI applications that we're seeing that are hitting scale, there's a line of people who come and say, how soon can we start doing this in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Colombia, in Peru? So I think it's a great opportunity for us in India to kind of be the leader for the world in showing how AI can be used. And I think it comes at an especially opportune time because we know that overseas development assistance from the developed world has been massively disrupted this year in 2025. You know, USAID, the UK government, German government, etc., are scaling all of that back dramatically. And I think it really opens up the space for us as a nation to go in and say, we can give you affordable, low-cost, effective, technology-enabled, AI-enabled ways of addressing healthcare issues, education issues, skilling issues, etc. It's a unique moment in time that we need to make the most of.
Very interesting, and I think these stories are definitely very powerful. One thing which, you know, especially in India, that when we set up the whole digital infrastructure, the DPI thinking said that, you know, the systems have to be interoperable, they have to scale, one person as well as like thousands and millions of people, they should have the same experience with the system they are interacting with. It has to be open. So, and also what happened is that, you know, there is a collaboration of organizations which come together to deliver it to the last mile. What are your thoughts on this collaboration, nobody doing it all, and actually making it open for everybody to use, right? Because the scale, of course, Badhwani AI is doing great work, but how do you create the network? How do you make it a viral effect of social change which can happen?
It's a challenge, I'll be candid. And I think there are two levels of issues over here. So at the end of the day, the only entity that has the scale to impact large, you know, percentages of the population, whether it's India, whether it's any country in the global south, is government, right? At the end of the day, they've got the reach, whether it's in healthcare, in education, and skilling, and so on. And then there are people like us sitting in the room, you know, whether we're all private organizations, or whether we're for-profit, non-profit. We have ideas, we have solutions we develop, and so on. The first area where you need an effective partner model is between government and the organizations they work with. That is absolutely lacking. Government tends to look at people they work with as vendors, come in, do their technical development, leave the rest to us, we'll take it out, etc. Conversely, from our side, we're good technically, we'll develop what looks like a nice solution, but again, like I said earlier, with very little understanding of government workflows, with how ASHA workers actually operate, how teachers teach, and then solutions don't work. And that's why, like I said, 95, 98% of these solutions. So I think that's problem number one. Problem number two is within our sector. We all talk about collaboration, and yesterday and today are great examples, right? How many times we've heard the word collaboration? Yet, the social sector, whether it's India, whether it's the US, because I'm involved in the social sector in the US, very little collaboration actually happens. We all talk about it, groups get formed, cooperatives get formed, they'll run for a few months or a few years, but actually working together, where I say I will sacrifice A or B from what I'm doing because you're doing it better than me, no.
And why not?
Tough issues. This is human nature.
Yeah.
I'm getting funding from these, 5 people. I don't want to give any of that up. I've developed what I think are these competencies. Who are you to come and tell me you're going to do this better? So we all talk about it. I talk about the collaboration is really important, but actually making it happen in practice, very challenging anywhere in the world. We need to figure out better models of how do you make that happen. And I don't have an answer yet.
Okay. So I was very intrigued by, one of the initiative that you have, which is 2070 Health. It's 2070. I don't know if I'll be alive by that time, but I know that for my children, I definitely want a great 2070 Health. And there are some visions which come. I would like to know your vision.
Sure. So first of all, there are some advanced thinkers around the world who feel that if each of us can stay alive for another 20 to 25 years, there's a good chance we can live forever. if you look at the rate of improvement in medicine.
But it's 45 years.
Huh?
2070 is 45 years.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is even before that, technologies are coming up and they get more powerful every decade. So if you look at the last century, right, life expectancy globally 100 years ago was around 40 years, right? Today, globally, it's around 78, 79. It's almost doubled. So every decade over the last century, we've added about 2.5 to 3 years to our lifespan. AI will now cause that to accelerate. There are other, and more than AI, synthetic biology, which we are not discussing, that's not the subject of what we're, that is going to be as or potentially even more disruptive than AI. It's coming. And of course, AI is putting synthetic biology on steroids. Organ transplants, growing organs, personalized medicine, AI helping us with new drug discovery. What Google DeepMind did with this model they developed called AlphaFold, which has come up with new proteins, new molecules that unknown to man, which could be used for a variety of diseases, etc., that we haven't seen before. So anyway, so that's what's coming up. 2070 Health that you mentioned is the following, which is that in India, 10 years back, I launched my public health foundation, which has, touch wood, done well. 6 years back, I launched my artificial intelligence foundation, which is doing extremely well. We're impacting over 50 million people a year in India. We have a full-time team now of over 400 people, AI, machine learning people, etc. But then about 3 years ago, I said we've got these large areas of unmet healthcare need in India and in the global south. So things like chronic care management. Giant issue, right? As a country develops, India is a great example, the level of communicable diseases starts coming down, but the level of NCDs starts going up. Heart disease, cardio, cancer, COPD, things like that. And so mental health, big issue. So around 3 years back, I said, look, these nonprofits are doing great work, but could we take an entrepreneurial approach to trying to address some of these issues at scale? So 2070 Health is basically a healthcare venture studio that I started in India to identify areas where we need disruptive new ideas. I've got a research team that comes up with the ideas, comes up with the plan on how we pursue this. I've got an engineering team that comes up with the tech stack. We find the right entrepreneurs to drive the ideas forward, give them startup capital, give them a huge amount of equity, and then get them going. So I've got about 12 companies right now that have gotten started over the last 3 years, addressing these kinds of areas: chronic care management, AI-based mental health, 21st century pediatric care. The latest company we launched is a cancer care company in partnership with Narayana Health from India, and which we think in 5 years could be the largest provider of cancer care in India. And the goal over there is to bring cancer care closer to people's homes. So that's what 2070 Health does. And again, it's a complement to what I'm trying to do with on the nonprofit side.
Yeah. So it's not like crazy Silicon dream of I want to live till 100, but it is actually helping solve cancer and based in India and having impact on the ground.
Absolutely. And all of this, by the way, will help us live to 100 and beyond. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, one thing which, keeps coming to our mind is like, the global north, the global south, and the AI ambitions of global north vis-a-vis the AI ambitions of global south. What can we learn? You have feet in both the places, right? So what's the thing that you think global south can learn, and also vice versa? So, how do we bridge the gap?
So that's a great question. So we've got these two interesting models, right, in the AI world right now. And let's face it, there are two countries. I don't think there's a global north where AI is concerned. I think there's one country, the US, which is way ahead, and there's China, which is way ahead. Europe is far behind. We've got 2 or 3 AI companies there which are getting some level of scale. In the global south, there's India, there's Vietnam, there's Indonesia, there's very little else, beyond that. But the key point is that the two models, the US model is very much a commercially led model, You've got Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, all of these folks investing hundreds of billions of dollars every year in doing all of this stuff, but it's all a commercial model. How do we get people to buy more? How do we make more money? We have shareholders to satisfy, etc., etc. All these hundreds of billions of dollars being spent in the US, very little thinking is going into how do we use AI to improve lives for the 3 or 4 billion people in the world who make less than $5 a day. Very little thinking is going into it. Conversely, you've got China with its state-led model, which has a totally different perspective on the uses of AI, on the goals of what we want to do. But I think, this big gap, you said, what's the gap? How do we address it? The big gap is, again, how do we use AI to improve healthcare, education, skilling, etc., for these 3 or 4 billion people in the Global South? And even within the Global South, if we want to focus, there are really 2 parts of the world where if we make a dramatic change, it moves the entire world forward in terms of trying to get closer to accomplishing the SDGs. And these 2 geographies are South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And if we develop a portfolio of AI solutions, and it's again, not just AI solutions. Let me back up. If you don't mind, I'll take a 2-minute digression. So when I talk to these senior civil servants and ministers of education or health or whatever in different countries in the Global South, here's what I hear, and it's a constant theme. They say, look, I keep reading all this hype about AI, and here's this AI for diabetes and AI for XYZ, etc. And they say, look, I'm running the health ministry of country X. I'm already starved for resources. I've got very poor infrastructure. I've got no AI compute. Smartphone penetration isn't that great. So what do I do with all these so-called AI solutions? What government systems do they plug into? How do I train my frontline workers on how to use this? So what they're looking for desperately is give me some idea about how to think about AI in a system level way over the next 3-4 years. So it's not about this is my solution for, okay, how to improve diabetic retinopathy. And like that, I can give you 100 solutions. It's if I'm running the health ministry in Kenya, what is the roadmap for me for the next 5 years with AI? How do I make my AI health ministry AI enabled? How do I make my country's health system AI enabled? What are the data governance standards that I need? What are the policies that I need at the government level? What are the data sets that I need to develop? What kind of capacity building do I need to do for senior civil servants? That's where it all starts. Then you look at, okay, what solutions do you integrate into the systems? You look at how to roll that out. But one has to think of it in that holistic kind of way if we want to make tangible long-term change in these countries.
Yeah, thank you. No, that really sums it well. And especially in the morning today, we had a good work group discussion on a framework where, this capacity, we talked about all this, that what does it take for the use case to succeed is all that what you mentioned here. So I know time is up. I would have loved to ask one last question, but I think I need to give it back to the audience for 2 questions because time is up for quite some time. Yes, the first, and okay.
Mr. Wadhwani, you talked about the governments and you talked about the social sector and the challenges and how they look at AI to kind of get scale. But when you look at the third segment, you look at corporates like ITC, eChopal example, where they have thousands of outlets giving advisory service. They have grounds up data which they can analyze, commercialize, and really build impact for a large segment. So would you throw some light on the corporates in India which have the data sets in this space of either health, agri-tech, where they can really do impact because they have the data and they're really doing good work over the last 10 years?
That's a great question, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I think there's a big role they have to play, but with some constraints. And the biggest constraint is the following. In the US, I've run a public company. I started the company, built it up. Excuse me, we grew to about 35,000 employees. And as a company CEO, your first responsibility, is to your shareholders. They've invested money in your company. They expect you to give them a return on that money, etc. That is paramount. That becomes a constraint in terms of what companies can do and company leaders can do in terms of using X amount of their resources in ways that don't necessarily generate a short-term return. Long-term, they can generate returns, no question. You're building your markets, more people will buy your product as they get better educated, as their healthcare improves, etc. But that's 10 years out. In the meantime, markets, whether you're in India or whether you're in the US, are looking at your quarterly earnings. If your earnings per share are down by 2% because you made some, so you have to keep that in mind. Having said all of that, there are companies absolutely that are looking at how do we use our data, how do we use the AI skills that we're developing for the greater good. At this stage, though, it's in its very, very early stages. Hopefully it'll grow. I think it'll grow. And if I can just broaden out for just a minute, if we look beyond these immediate solutions we're talking about in healthcare, etc., I'll tell you the one big tidal wave that's coming, that's going to be hugely disruptive, is the large-scale destruction of jobs that we're going to see globally. We're starting to see the early effects of that in more advanced economies like the US, etc., because AI penetration is a little greater, but you can absolutely see it happening. Entry-level jobs in accounting, in finance, in law, these are all areas where we all encourage our kids, go to college, become a professional, this is where you learn money. And now suddenly, you can see at the lower level, these jobs are starting to get impacted. And AI is getting 10x more powerful every year. That's an exponential curve that we have never seen before in the technology world, ever. It's going to be huge. So you've seen, of course, we've all read all the dire predictions and all, and we've seen the rosy predictions, but this is coming up. So skilling, to me, reskilling is going to be a giant challenge for every country, including the US, to India, to Nigeria, to Ethiopia, everywhere. And no one has figured out what that means. Everyone talks about reskilling, but reskilling in what? What are the jobs that are going to be in demand 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? So if you ask me, I would say things like analytics, things like supervision of AI models, but it's tough to take someone who is, let's say, a data entry operator, right? It's a white-collar job. Who's a clerk, white-collar job, and say, okay, you're going to be now a data scientist. So those things need to start being thought through fairly quickly at a global level so we can start developing a skilling infrastructure isn't that tough, meaning how you deliver the training. But what do you train people on? So, we all have people coming to us, younger children saying, looking for career guidance, what do you do, etc. And until 5 years back, 8 years back, it was fairly easy, Go to college, go into law, go into engineering, go into medicine, etc. Your future will be there. Now it's much more unclear.
And dynamic.
So I just became a granddad, so I've got 2 little grandkids, 2 years old, 2 months old. When they become 15 years old and they ask me, what should we do? I have no clue right now what I'm going to tell them. Because a lot of today's jobs will be gone.
Yeah.
But this is a public sector issue. Governments, with the assistance of the private sector, need to start thinking about this seriously. But I don't see this happening anywhere in the world, including the US.
Yeah, sure. We don't have time. Sorry, Mr. Sunil is around, and so please, spend some time with him. It's an evening, and there is dinner, and we have one more very interesting panel coming up. So thank you, Mr. Sunil Wadhwani. Thank you for your commitment to India. Thank you for bringing the best insights and enlightening all of us.
And just to end on a positive note, I hate to end on a down note of, jobs going down the tube. But like I said, I'll just reinforce the fact that this is a unique moment of time that I think opens up the space for India to truly show that it can be a global leader in the, so it can be a leader, the leader in the global south in terms of showing how to apply AI for social good. No one else is doing it. We have the experience here. We have the large-scale use cases. We've got, I think, a very enlightened government in terms of how to use technology. The next 2, 3, 4 years are going to be critical in playing this role. I know right now there's a lot of focus on this AI summit that's coming up in 60 days. That's all good. We need to make sure it's successful. The much bigger issue is what happens after the summit. How do we follow through on all of these good things we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
The new era of AI. That's what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you for a timely and thoughtful conversation. And now, the last session of this year's GTS Innovation Dialogue. We have the final panel, the spine that powers use cases, compute and its discontents. For this, I'd like to welcome to the stage Shiko Gitao, Chief Executive Officer, Kahala, Raymond Ononibu, Founder, Horus Labs, Raghu Dharmaraju, Chief Executive Officer, Art Park at the Indian Institute of Science. This panel will be moderated by Shankar Maruwada, Co-Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Ekstep Foundation. Please. Can I have the video, please? Floor is all yours, Shankar.
Thank you. What are 2 days? Intense discussion, frank open conversations, productive partnerships, and a lot of bonds being formed. We are the last panel, and I'm sure it will be very insightful. I had some open comments to kick things off, but I'm so excited by the three of you and what you bring to the table that I'm going to jump straight into the questions. The theme today is compute infrastructure is the backbone of every AI success story. Yet, it remains a critical bottleneck in development and deployment. What this panel will do is bring together practitioners who will examine the practical realities of scaling AI solutions, from managing compute costs and accessibility to navigating infrastructural gaps in diverse environments. The discussion will explore pathways to building sustainable access models that enable AI solutions to move from pilots to population scale deployment. A point that previous speakers have also highlighted. A lot of the pilots don't go beyond the lab. I have with me Shiko Gitao, CEO of Kala, Raymond, founder of Horus Labs, and Raghu, CEO of Artpack. I'll introduce you one by one and then ask you the question so that we can jump straight into it. I want to begin with you, Raymond. So let me introduce Raymond. Raymond Ononivu is the founder and CEO of Horus Labs, a technology and infrastructure company building Africa's next generation digital backbone through modular, renewable powered, AI ready data centers. An engineer with more than 15 years of experience delivering products across mixed reality, Windows analytics, and Teams Copilot. His work has powered platforms relied on by hundreds of millions globally. He founded Horus Labs in 2022 to address one of the continent's most urgent challenges, the absence of sovereign high-performance compute. Horus Labs is enabling governments, enterprises, and innovators to run compliant cloud GPU and AI workloads locally, advancing digital sovereignty, economic inclusion, and Africa's long-term technological resilience. My question to you, Raymond, is this. You've been vocal about the need for Africa to build sovereign local compute capacity. Why has this issue become so important globally? And what is driving the push for AI infrastructure sovereignty across regions?
I think if we take a look at what's happening with AI and current geopolitics, right, it's quite clear that compute has now become a national priority, right? When a country or a region fails to build its own sovereign compute, it is a permanent consumer of the models, the laws, and the actual priorities of another locale, right? It also goes back to what Mr. Madhwani was saying about the way, the rationale behind how people build. In the global south, I think it's imperative that we take a different look at this new paradigm that's about to change humanity. We need to look at it from a values-based perspective. We need to build things that are relevant to the development and progress of humanity versus, you know, a more capital-based outlook or sort of a world-controlled perspective. I think it is now entirely up to us to look at this new technology and build from the ground up for the people that matter in order to include as much of the world as we can in that development. So it's crucial, it's imperative, not just from a national security perspective or, you know, from a commercial angle, but we actually can make significant change that we will benefit from. I mean, India and Africa are quite similar in the diversity, the population size, the market size. The difference in Africa being it's just 54 countries versus, you know, a single country. So I think we stand to make a difference if we build from a values perspective upwards.
Wonderful. Shiko, I'll come to you. Before that, I would love to introduce Shiko. Shiko Gitao is the CEO of Kahala. Is that? Kala, a leading digital innovation company transforming Africa. With over a decade of expertise in digital technologies, she drives digital transformation for organizations in Africa and emerging markets, focusing on diverse sectors like agriculture, education, health, payments, and retail. She established Safaricom Alpha, Africa's first corporate innovation hub, serving as head of products, innovation, and as the chief innovation officer, leading Safaricom's digital transformation. At the Africa Development Bank, she guided governments in adopting ICT for delivery, developing the digital government blueprint. Her experience at Google and Microsoft in emerging market further bridges business, government, and technology. She has a PhD and MSc in computer science from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Shiko, given your diverse experience and the fact that you have guided digital governments, you've guided governments on digital and data governance, how should African governments think about long-term compute infrastructure, centralized versus decentralized, sovereign versus cloud dependent, when they're designing their national AI strategy?
Thank you very much, and I'm happy we are the last panel because I'm happy and sad because the room should have been fuller, but happy because the previous panels and conversations actually preempted what I was going to say. So I was thinking, oh, they're saying all my points, which is good. So when you think about AI strategies in Africa, when you have 16 countries with any form of policy, regulation, or strategy in Africa, so this is a good question for anyone who is watching this from Africa. And my advice to many of them, of the countries that ask us this question is, it's not an either or, it's and, yeah? So it is not centralized versus decentralized, yeah, or sovereign versus cloud. It is seeing it layer by layer, yeah. If you're to take the example of the ambassador who was here before, and she said that a ChatGPT or AI is a general purpose technology like electricity and stuff. think of then compute as the rail, yeah? Think of it as the ports, the roads, the power lines. Think about it as an enabling environment for the general purpose technology to happen. But don't think of it as just a standalone. When I think about compute, and I think we had this discussion yesterday, is compute is a stack. It's not just GPUs. And that is a misconception that most people have, is you're coming to sell me, oh, I'm going to give you a cluster of 3,000 GPUs to do what with? Yeah? So when you ask yourself why, the question of why compute, then you start unraveling the stack. And the stack is made, yes, with the GPUs, but we have power, we have talent, we have data sets. It's a model that we came up with at Kala that is called the four horsemen model, that is made of compute as an infrastructure play, which is power and energy and the GPUs, but also includes talent. It also includes data sets and data systems where the culture and context is actually captured. And most importantly, it captures the market, the use cases. Because what's the point of having GPUs, 3,000 of them or whatever, and building all these models, and nobody is using them? So we have to be able to take care of all of that. So that is how we look at compute, is you have to solve for the whole stack. Not all of it at the same time, but you have to look at it, especially because compute is very expensive to invest in as a country. But then when we ask the question, so what? How do we think of these different types of like compute? You think of it from like sovereign at the core, and Raymond has talked about it. Is many countries in Africa are extremely afraid of being switched off. I mean, we are not going to talk about geopolitics, and I'm not a very good expert at geopolitics. I'll leave to Rudra and his team to talk about it. But geopolitics is a big fear amongst many policymakers in Africa. They keep thinking, what if the cloud is switched off? And it has happened, guys. In June, when China was doing its national examination, all of the African developers who were building on DeepSeek and Queen and all of these things, they went offline. Yeah? And now many of the startups that are going into Africa, who are in Africa, who are building on top of Meta's fabric, which is like WhatsApp and Llama, are living an existential risk of being switched off. Why? Because Meta has said if you don't meet a certain compliance mechanism, you're being switched off. So this is not just a theoretical risk, it's a real risk. So sovereignty at core is very important, yeah? And sovereignty means I'm going to keep the data that is important to my country. Our intelligence data, defense data, some health data. I mean, being a Kenyan, I'm putting a question mark at the end because of recent announcements. But data that is important for the safety and security of our people in our country needs to be put on core. Then, number two, we need to think about edge. We're in Africa. Power is not the most accessible thing. So being able to allow some of this compute to be on edge, very frugal, that can be run on device, is very, very important. And then the big elephant in the room, cloud. Oh my God, the amount of arguments I've had about cloud. Oh, they are going to steal our data. But there is, like I'll give you a very solid example. During COVID, we needed to crunch a lot of data sets at a very short time to be able to enable our governments to make decisions. We couldn't do that on edge or my computer. We had to go, and AWS did give us cloud compute to run these models. At times of that where there is need for like a burst of power and compute, that's when you rely on that. But then in there you work with, am I going to put some of the data on-prem and do the processing on cloud? You have to enable the governments to see all of that. But it goes back to the previous speaker who said, and he said he was so on the mark, because that's exactly the same feedback, is when you go to African government, don't sell them GPUs. Sell them a solution, the full stack. So when you go and talk to governments about your AI strategy, you're not selling them, oh, this is how to get 3,000 GPUs, but rather this is how to solve for health. And like, for example, COVID, when we went to sell cloud to them, we said, you know, we want to solve for COVID, we have all these data sets that you've given us. We can't be able to provide you the solution without this cloud access. And we got it was the first and I think the only exemption that we got for running the models on cloud. So it is, when you think about cloud, you think about compute from, it's a stack. It is about sovereignty to a point. It's about the use case that you're solving for, but also it's about the use case you're solving for, but also the solution you're providing to the governments. That's how we sell it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiko. You've really unpacked the nuances of what otherwise is a very simplistic 0-1 kind of a situation. Now I'll come from Africa to India, and my good friend Raghu Dharmaraju. Raghu is the CEO of Art Park at the Indian Institute of Science. He has been building and scaling innovations and institutions for impact for over 2 decades. He is a fellow of the Lancet Commission for Reimagining India's Health Systems. Art Park fosters innovation in AI and robotics through startups, platforms, and skilling. It is also helping impact-focused organizations leverage LLMs for societal good at scale in LMICs, and building DPIs and DPGs, or digital public goods, in health, climate, and languages, partnering with the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, NITI, ICMR, NITI Aayog, and some other states and cities. Along with partners like Arman and Belong, it is a double winner of the Global Grand Challenge for Equitable AI. Raghu, the Indian government has introduced a distinctive approach to addressing compute access that is now shaping the demand for localized AI infrastructure. In your view, is this model working? If you could describe the model, and do you think it's a viable blueprint for other countries in the global south confronting similar challenges?
Well, I'm no expert on other countries' budgets, but we are very grateful for the approach Indian government has taken, and I'll give you some examples, very specific examples, right? So some of our climate work is actually a winner of the India AI Mission Challenge and also Grand Challenges India. Through this, we've received compute access, right? And which you can imagine is quite critical at the stage of model training. There is a startup of ours that we built from scratch at IISc, Professor Sasi Ganeshan. They are building what you call scientific foundation models, right? You might not think of that as societal good, but if you think of sovereignty and core technologies that global south needs, these scientific foundation models that are used in engineering design are very critical, right? We funded them. I'm going to try, let me stay with crores, because by the time I convert it, I might mess it up, right? The number of zeros, millions, lakhs, it's a mess. Sorry, not enough compute here, right? So we funded them roughly, let's say, 3 crores, right? But the India AI mission, yeah, $300,000. Actually, given the depreciation, it's getting easier, the compute, right? So just cut a couple of zeros, I guess. But the India AI mission came in. They were one of the 8 foundational model challenge winners. They currently are going to have around, let's say, 250 to 300 crores of compute costs taken care of for the next year, right? It doesn't cover all their costs, but they are going to make a lot of progress based on that. So to me, it is working. I will, maybe in follow-on we can talk about, I think we have a lot of anxiety about compute, and part of that comes from not using it smartly. Right? And we can talk about that a little bit later, which is how you might use compute during initial proof of concept needn't be the same that you use for scaling. Right?
Maybe I'll
Stuff
ask you a
like
follow-up question, just to build on that. At least the mics are not going rogue. You supported AI deployments in lower and middle income contexts. What strategies have been effective in ensuring that compute heavy models remain viable in low resource or intermittent connectivity environments?
Yeah, so actually you asked the question that I wanted to kind of get ahead a little bit, right? First, this whole idea of, I mean, let's take generative AI as such can be very compute heavy, right? But sometimes you actually should not be generating de novo answers to every question, right? If you take a question X, even something that's a bit complex in public health, right? And given a particular language or a combination of languages, maybe there are 10, 20, 30 ways of asking a certain question, right? Now, instead of trying to interpret every time, if you take, let's say you cache these various modes in which you are getting that
FAQs
question,
in the old world.
right? FAQs in the old world, cache that, and do maybe a new world semantic search sort of thing. Suddenly you bring that amount of compute you have to use dramatically lower, right? That is one example. There is also lots of smart ways of doing compute at the edge, right? We have worked with professors at IISc on oral cancer. Actually, at my previous organization, Debjani AI, something more heavy, anthropometric measurements. We've actually compressed the models down to the phone, right?
The point that Chico was saying, there is a need for...
And this takes good, smart engineering. The analogy I will use is, you might build a prototype, a hardware prototype using 3D printing, this, etc. That's very expensive. But there comes a point when you do what's called DFM, design for manufacturing at scale, right? So often what I find is that design for manufacturing, design for large scale production, that mindset and capability is missing, which then goes back to really burn your budgets on compute, right? So I just wanted to share some of those.
It could also be a barrier to scale if you don't do that DFM.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Barrier to scale. It could also be a barrier even your, even in your training, right? Where you're trying to, let's say there's a use case, you have to be, this is an important thing, you have to be really use case first. Maybe yours is a screening use case where 90%, I'll use some unscientific terminology here, 90% accuracy might be good enough, right? Because it's essentially referring certain. Now when you do that, you can literally reduce the model size. It's a trade-off, whereas trying to go for that 95% might blow it out of the water in terms of, every little bit of accuracy costs more, right? So it's really thinking deeply about your use case and asking what's the trade-off between the impact, and realizing that AI is not the only thing that is actually going to, that money probably is better spent in maybe training the ASHA workers and taking that image a little bit better.
Yeah. As Sunil said in the previous session, that AI may only be 30%, 70% is non-AI.
I would say AI is 10%. You can't move. Look, there's so much that has to happen before the AI model comes in and after, in the physical world anyway, right? So, and I think when we think of evaluating solutions, we should think of AI model as one piece of it. The evaluations after and before also important before you get to your outcomes.
Wonderful. Raymond, I'll ask you a follow-up question to that based on some conversation we had in the closed group yesterday in education. As someone selling AI infrastructure, I was very impressed yesterday when you talked about value-based, right? It should generate value. Coming back to Raghu's point, that think of the use case and work backwards from that. If you could share some of those perspectives that you shared with me, and I have a follow-up question, but if you could start off with this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of, when we talk about AI, my sort of definition of what AI is supposed to do is, assuming you had an assembly line factory, right? You have a level 1 worker, you have a level 3 worker, with level 1 being the most junior, level 3 being the most senior. What AI is actually supposed to do, and where it sort of shines, is it can help the level 1 person perform at a level 3, and it can help the level 3 person do 8 hours of work in 4 hours, right? That's one way to look at it. The second part of it for the Global South is we still have a lot of constraints, we still have a lot of challenges. I hate to do this, I always use Snapchat as an example, but if anybody's from Snapchat here, please don't skewer me. We shouldn't be building companies that help people delete pictures. We have challenges, we have real challenges that we need to solve, right? So I think for us, there's a unique opportunity for us in the Global South to think values first, right? What are the things that matter to us? And quite frankly, what a lot of these models are is going to be a transfer of culture, right? Systems behave, eventually they start behaving organically like the people who created them. You
made a very interesting statement. Models are a transfer of culture. Can you double click into that?
A Chinese model will reflect Chinese culture and Chinese values, right? American models will reflect capitalism and sort of American culture, right? An American model will not, for example, as Africans, respect for elders is a massive thing for us, right? Whenever I go home, I take my dad everywhere because he helps me, get things done. They just see an older guy and they say, okay, sir, come sit here, get this done. Those things are so pivotal to our cultures, right? But a US model, an individual is an individual, right? Respect for elders is not heavily weighted when you think about it. So I think when you look at it as transfer of culture, what matters to India and to Indians and what Indians collectively are trying to achieve will be reflected in the models that they build, right? Ultimately, the things we do for work, we're all aiming to sort of create a world that we want to see, a world that we want to live in. And so when you look at these models, if you sort of fast forward 200 years from now and say humanity and civilization destroyed itself, you will be able to go back at these models, and from an anthropological point of view, you will see the people who created it. You will understand their cultures. You will see sort of what they're made of. If you look at, I can't remember the space probe that we sent out back in the 80s that's sort of at the edge of our galaxy. Yeah, Voyager, right? What does Voyager have? Jazz, American culture, right? I don't think there's anything on there that says the Taj Mahal, right? So if some alien civilization finds it, what they're going to find is the story of America, right? And so it's super important that we think about some of these things this way to make sure that the world we move into and the world we live in doesn't become a world where languages are lost, cultures are lost, right? Ancient civilizations have a lot. It's almost like humanity does this thing where it goes forward, then it circles back to what ancient civilizations have been saying for eons, right? We cannot afford to keep making that mistake. So it's imperative that as the Global South, when we think of what we build and we think of what we deliver to the rest of the world, we are the preservers of culture. We are the preservers of value, right? That is the role that we play. So it's important that we keep this in mind when we build. And if we can solve a lot of the critical problems on Earth, right? Guess who benefits the most from it? We are. India, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. We will reap the massive benefits and our societies will grow.
Wonderful. You also alluded to the practical constraints of, for innovators, building across, right? This could be innovators building AI for agriculture, fintech, or health in Africa. How can infrastructure providers like you better meet their needs?
I think when you look at some of these spaces, the constraints are typical. It's like data quality. And one of the things about the whole compute conversation is, like you said, GPUs are one thing, right? For every time you have one GPU, chances are you have two CPUs. And chances are you need a significant amount of storage. So CPUs are also growing sort of in parallel with the demand for GPUs, right? When you build a service, you're not hitting a GPU directly, right? You have caches, you have cache mechanisms, there's some decision tree that happens before you decide this needs to go to a GPU to be computed, right? So when we talk about compute, we're not just saying GPUs, right? You're saying everything that is relevant to it. So when you look at what the constraints are, you have data quality, interoperability, storage of data, right? That is a constraint. You have connectivity and bandwidth. Training training is expensive, right? You need really great connectivity for training. inference also requires, you need high bandwidth for training, but you need good connectivity for inference, right? You also look at regulatory frameworks. Most of them are fragmented. Things like KYC, anti-money laundering. When you look at the level at which some of these things are developed, right? You have hobbyists, you have small SMEs. The on-ramp to build some of these solutions are completely laced with regulation that is fragmented. India is a single country, so the regulation sort of applies within the domain of India. However, when I build something, there's, in East Africa, there's the East Africa bloc regulations, there are the regulations within a country. I go west, that changes. So there are some frameworks that are being put in place to sort of address these things, but these are the real life challenges that make it a little bit difficult for these things to happen. However, on our end, what we're determined to do is, let's first of all start with, is the compute there? Is it available? Can you have it when you need it? That's checkbox number one. The second thing, I think I asked I asked a couple of people today, I think in India, UPI is sort of the common form of payment. I was asking someone, can I buy ChatGPT tokens with UPI? Is there a yes answer somewhere? So that rail doesn't exist. You see what I mean? Despite some of these things happening, there are still rails that ensure inclusivity. I mean, mobile payments is the largest sort of form of digital infrastructure that exists in the global south, but we still haven't made effort to on-ramp people who use mobile money to access compute. So that's one of the things we're looking at. For the hobbyist, for the startup, for the person who wants to use the paid version of, a model for 2 days, right? The sachet economy, we still haven't distilled compute down to the sachet economy. And the closest thing we have to that is mobile phones. You look at what happened with mobile phones in the global south, there was proliferation and it actually worked out when people could just buy what they need, right? People were able to buy what they need. USSD in most of Africa became a thing. Most people primarily access any kind of technology via USSD. I pay my electric bills, I pay people, I pay my taxes, everything is text this to that code, right? So I think when we look at it, instead of sort of waiting for the rest of the global south to have mobile penetration where everybody gets smartphones, let's meet them where they are, right? I think that's one other crucial element that we need to put in place. And then the other part of it is the interoperability, right? If I'm doing something in Kenya and it works, how can I very quickly take that solution to Uganda where there's need and make sure that it lands? Because at the end of the day, our goal should be a straight line from what we're doing to the value that it provides. If there's something that works in India today, right? And I hear, I've spoken to a couple of people in the room, if I see an opportunity where I'm like, the education conversation we're having yesterday, there's a classic problem in education, teacher-student ratios, right? There are too many students in the class, the teachers are overwhelmed, right? They can't address everybody on an individual level. That problem is not an India-only problem. It's not a Rwanda-only problem. It's not a Nigeria-only problem. It's sort of across the global south. So if there's a solution here that works, how can I take that solution and very quickly go solve that problem somewhere else? The sooner we get the problem solved, the sooner there are kids in school, the sooner people learn, the sooner we grow the economy. The solutions we're looking for are in the heads of the people who are not bold enough to ask the teacher a question, right? So we need to create the on-ramps for interoperability, where we look at ourselves and say, okay, I know we are all different domains, we're all different jurisdictions, but really, who are the people we need to get in the room to say, India has a solution? How can we take that solution and very quickly apply it here? Or there's a solution in Uganda. How can I bring that to India? Is there a translation layer that needs to be applied? Is there a payment on-ramp that needs to be applied? We need to be hyper-aggressive about solving these problems and straight for the goal and the target, and bring stakeholders along in a way that works.
Wow, there's so many ideas there. My mind is buzzing with but just to recollect some of what you've discussed, and also what Raghu was saying some time ago. If I take the teacher-pupil ratio, to me, that's a use case. And Brazil might have solved it one way. A state in India might have solved it one way. As Raghu said, there are a whole bunch of steps before and after the compute, right? Before and after the exact solution. You talked of regulation, right? That's almost not before and after, that's almost underlying, right? Even things like payment. Those are all underlying factors of what Shalini would call as the horizontal enablers. So, in this case of the teacher-student ratio, it's the use case that I connect to. And then I'm seeing what Brazil has done, I'm seeing what they have done, and in my context, what can I on-ramp? What can I take straight away? What can I lift and shift? What is it that India has that a horizontal enabler that I need to think of, the whole country needs to think of, right? I think that's why some of the complexities happen, and it goes back to your point about the values. India's values, the values of the countries in Africa, context is different. And so the exact solution, lifting and shifting of that may not work, but certain components of it. Fascinating. And it's so refreshing for someone who's in the business of selling infrastructure. Talk about all of this. It's a big lesson for all of us. Shiko, coming to you. Kala works again across sectors. Health, agriculture, payments. What lessons have you learned about designing AI solutions that are resilient to infrastructure gaps, particularly in low connectivity and low compute environments?
Thank you very much. And I was hoping that Raymond at some point stops because he was just preempting again some of stuff. And in addition to value is when you look at these large language models, and I love that he said it's a transfer of culture. So hopefully when we come back in February, you're going to be releasing a paper of like a large scale study we've done around tokenization and how language is biasing our thinking, not just our perception of AI. Anyway, they're trying to boil the ocean. Yeah, they want to be the most intelligent. I mean, in the morning, Rudra was being given a hard time why there was no AGI conversation and super intelligence conversation by the group that was here in the morning. But have we thought about what is the minimum viable intelligence?
MVI, that's a new term.
And think when I'm a product person, and I was telling somebody I'm a product person, and we are all taught to think about the first principles of N before you build everything. Have we thought about the first principles of building AI? What are the first principles of intelligence? And we think about a minimum viable intelligence from any perspective. It drives you to what he just said, being hyper-focused on solving a problem for the value around it. Yeah? So we are trying to boil the ocean of making sure all the 2,000 languages are well represented in Llama and in OpenAI, in Claude, or the people whose companies I've just called. But are they good enough to solve for these places like education and health? The answer is no, and I have quantitative data to actually prove this. So yesterday, I think I mentioned we released a small benchmark on Swahili education. Because everybody's saying, oh, there are benchmarks for Swahili. Swahili is doing very well in Claude. It's doing everything. But when it boils down to it, is my child is going to be using Swahili to learn Swahili or to learn science. How well is Claude doing on that? And let me tell you, when it comes to that pass of a minimum viable intelligence, all these are failing because when it comes to application in Swahili education, in training young children on how to learn Swahili, it's failing. It's failing on how to teach young children to learn Swahili and to learn science using Swahili. And a few months ago, we did the exact same test in health. And I'll give you an example. For the women, the men will not understand this, so this is just an example for women. So we have a health team, and this AI super intelligence for healthcare came to us and said, oh, we've done this, you guys can test it, it even speaks Swahili. I said, oh, sure. And the first question was, what is the vaccination as a pregnant mother should I be getting at month 5? please women don't react kindly. The answer which came back in Kiswahili was rabies. I said, don't react. Did you see all the women almost fainted? Because what is the actual vaccination? Tetanus. And that's where we come to minimum viable intelligence. It's super intelligent, but not intelligent to the place where it's supposed to be. And when you think about it, it comes back to Africa and our constrained, I was writing all the words that we use, constrained, frugal, what is it called, hard way of building AI, because we lack all these things. But if we are going to be building minimum viable intelligence, we can actually do it without all of this. We don't have to boil the ocean. I'll be building a small language model for education, or a small language model for breast cancer, as I mentioned yesterday, or a small language model for mothers who are pregnant. It is small. It is a few parameters, even 100,000s of parameters to train. It is accurate. It is anchored on reality and actual users, actual doctors, actual teachers, people who can be accessible. And it solves the problem, that which is the key thing. Yeah? And it's not going to cost me billions of dollars to do. And that's the approach we've been doing. So we have all these small language models that we are releasing. We start with a benchmark to shock the world, like we did with the Kiswahili benchmark yesterday. In January, we're releasing a small language model for educators. And that's why I loved the teacher guy and the disability, because we're doing one for education and one for children with disabilities, mental learning disability. Because we are solving actual problems. The breast cancer model, the small one, nobody cares. It used a few $1,000s to build. It's actually solving a problem. It's minimum, it's viable, and it's intelligent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiko. That's very, very inspiring. Raymond, I want to come back to you to build on this conversation. From your experience, what are the major design principles needed for compute infrastructure in regions where power, connectivity, and capital availability are all highly constrained? How should people be thinking of designing?
I'm going to go ahead and steal the MVI and call it the MVI stack now. I think that's what the Global South needs to do. What's the MVI stack? I really like that. If you look at what the challenges are, actually this is something that I've been sort of thinking through the course of this year and trying to not only theorize but actually apply in our situation, right? In all of this, power is such a central conversation. Like if you look at the future, I think there are a couple of things that will drive sort of where the future goes when it comes to compute. Power is, bottom layer. Data centers and compute infrastructure, right? I say data centers because you need, some level of large storage, some level of high capacity, but also compute at the edge in a small scale. You have chips, right? The thing that everyone's fighting over. I think the Global South, and then you have, of course, the applications on top of it. I think the Global South can actually knock out 3 out of 4. Everything but chips, right? The chip conversation is, unless you guys are, someone is planning to run for office, it's at a much higher level. So when you look at it from a power perspective, you look at the constraints in the Global South. You have to be power conscious, right? The things that you build have to factor in intermittent power versus the always on paradigm, right? Again, minimum viable intelligence. You then also need to consider renewable sources, right? We're getting to a point where there's a non-trivial chance that compute and digital infrastructure builders will also be in the power business. You sort of need to secure the power you need for the compute that you're going to provide. The other thing is connectivity. A lot of the societies in the Global South have massive amounts of rural communities. I mean, it takes hours on road to get there. So you have to think about, when you think about training requires, again, a lot of bandwidth. You think about inference requires connectivity. So you need to think about edge cases, right? So if you look at it as sort of a funnel, you start out with the let's build compute, let's take sub-Saharan Africa as an example. let's build compute so that if a subsea cable gets damaged, we still have what we need in country. If China decides to shut down their cloud, we still have what we need in country. That's one level of redundancy. That's one way to sort of hedge for that issue. Then you move more inland, you go to the remote areas. There are some places that are not accessible for days, right? How do you still deliver solutions to them, right? Edge compute. How do you build solutions that don't need to be online all the time? The models that she's talking about, if this model is hyper-specific to, you know, a clinic that's in a rural area and the primary thing they deal with is malaria, can we put a model for malaria in a small device that the local clinic can use, right? We have to think about these scenarios where you have intermittent power, intermittent connectivity. You also have to build, one of the biggest challenges is fragmentation, right? When I go to Cameroon, how I access compute is different. When I go to Rwanda, when I go to Nigeria, it's like you start the spin cycle again. You need some level of common infrastructure, right? So that if and this is one of the things that my company is trying to do as well, where if I need to deploy a solution in Cameroon and I need to deploy that same solution in Uganda, all I need to do is select a drop down and it deploys that solution in the locale, that specific location. So interoperability is another thing. From a regulatory perspective, there needs to be deeper engagement with the stakeholders. We actually can't do this without government, right? They're a critical stakeholder in the entire equation, so it's important that we bring them along on the journey, right? I was having a conversation with someone outside about how the election cycles also have a significant impact on some of these things. People get voted out in tranches of 4 years or 5 years. So we sort of have to also engineer the MVI in such a way that it outlasts the political cycle, right? How do we get on a journey agnostic of who's in office? So that's one thing to solve for. The other part of it is skills development. Building the ecosystem is so crucial and so important for the longevity of things. It is also the case that the largest sort of our collective brain and our collective intelligence as humans is still by far more powerful than any AI or AGI that we can build. So we already have the best intelligence first. We just haven't networked it properly, right? So it now becomes a question of, yesterday in the education forum, we were having a conversation about how people are learning things differently. One of the places that I'm really happy to see AI shine is in education. India is a British system. I grew up in Nigeria, which is a British system. Kenya is a British system. There's a non-trivial chance that when we talk about things in math and science and English, we sort of have a common base, right? You either know the math or they beat it into you, right? And so, but what we're starting to see is there's a deeper awareness of the differences in humans, neurodivergence, the difference in how people learn, right? These are some of the things that I would say some of these societies in the global south haven't really paid attention to for a while. One of the things I love that AI is doing is, if I know 2 ways to do long division, I will suddenly discover a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th way to do it, right? And this is super inclusive because now the kid who doesn't understand the British way has other options. The key is learn long division. So what we're gonna see is a proliferation in the different options on how people learn. So that's going to benefit our education systems. The other part of it, and one of the reasons why I think having sovereign compute is super critical. I could watch all the videos about cricket that I want to watch. I mean, I could deeply immerse myself for all of 2026 in cricket. But until I pick up a bat and I play a game, I will never be a cricketer, right? It's important for people to be in the arena. Right. One of the things that I'm super excited for is one of the plans we have is to do data center tours for schools and education in our region. I want to be able to go grab a bunch of students from, you know, all the way from primary all the way to high school. Come spend a day with us at the data center. We'll feed you, but you sort of see how things operate, how the internet works. It's super important to seed those things so that people don't just read theory, they get to see. And they get to see people like them who are doing it, right?
So the principles are seen in practice,
yes,
in the arena.
One of the things that really seeds, people can only move or create to the extent of their imagination, right? So the part of the reason why these things need to be sovereign is so that we can extend the imagination of the populace. And so that 10, 20, 30 years from now, there's not a shortage of skills. People can actually innovate. You've built the foundation on which people can innovate. And one of the things I'm really, really excited for the Global South is, there's this conversation, every time I have a pitch, right, or I have to talk to people who are asking me what my business is about and, you know, how are you going to do this? This costs so much money. I always ask them, what do you envision as a data center? When you think about a data center, what do you see, right? People are like rows and rows of computers and massive facilities and the whole 9 yards. And then I tell them I'm building a 180 square meter facility that's a tier 3. And it's like, right? It's super important for people to see the reality of these things and for us as the Global South to innovate. We're not going to burn through billions in capital. Where at some point, you know, we've seen that everything going on with geopolitics where one day you can get GPUs, the next day you can't get GPUs. Today you're a friend, tomorrow you're no longer a friend. We will have to solve these problems with constraints, and this is where we shine. Right? This is really where the Global South shines. Let's get these tools in our hands so that we can work around the constraints. And I guarantee you, we'll be able to figure out how to build the models better, for cheaper. We'll be able to figure out how to optimize older hardware. Right? These are the value props. These are the things that we are good at. And so it's super critical that we get to task very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I give an example? I mentioned we have some GPUs back in Nairobi. So when you were launching the center, we got some GPUs for sure. Now remember our PS. PS is, I don't know what a PS, permanent secretary, principal, they call it principal secretary in Kenya. They're just under the minister. He was on who was launching the center, and he came with like the Kenya Investment Authority of Chief Executive Officer and a few other government people came, and he said, yeah, sir, this is the GPU. And he said, this is GPU? I said, yeah. I thought it was a whole container. And for me, that was the most amazing moment of 2025, because that what he's saying, believability clicked. Is like, oh my God, we can have GPUs in Kenya. We don't need 15 acres of land to actually host some of these things. And I totally agree. I just want to emphasize that because it was one of my favorite moments for this year.
Wow, that's a stunning incident. Father, time is ticking down. So Raghu, I'll come to you for the last word. The question is, through Art Park, you've supported AI and robotics, innovations for societal good across health, climate, and languages. What have you learned about the compute needs of mission-critical social sector applications, and where do the current gaps lie?
We actually touched on the compute needs a little bit, right? I see that a lot of gap is in just thinking smartly about how you put use case first and engineer backwards smartly. What you do at a prototype stage has to be different from what you do at a scaling stage. And there are various engineering tricks there. I used one example. I actually want to shift attention a little bit beyond compute in terms of other DPI. If you put a gun to my head right now and say, Raghu, what are you most worried about mission critical stuff? It's actually not compute. It's purpose appropriate, use case appropriate data. And I think as an ecosystem,
Can you give an example of that?
I'll give an example of that. Let's say, TB. We talked about TB, infectious disease that kills more people every year. In fact, I was instrumental in really pushing hard when I was at Vadvani AI to pick that up, right? But many years after we thought we solved chest X-ray TB AI, right? If you really see how much it has scaled, right, or see how much revenue Cure AI really makes in India and how many deployments they have, relative to the denominator, it's less. And one of the key reasons for that is not that there are no AI models, it's because we do not know how to validate them. Validating them requires creating benchmarks. Benchmarks means highly annotated and characterized data sets that are appropriate to use cases. It's like saying, if I'm going to test for active case finding, this is the kind of data set that needs to be brought together. Now, if you think further, now am I going to validate it in New Delhi and use it in Kerala?
No.
We don't know, right? What we need is a DPI that allows a more localized testing in adherence to certain data standards and requirements. So those data standards and requirements in TB, after all these years, do not exist for what a benchmark data set for use case X looks like, right? And there is an expectation that simply because we have so many TB cases, like this is like water everywhere, right?
So
that we should be able to drink it.
There's a horizontal enabler which is missing.
There's a horizontal enabler, and also I think it's a distributed system, right? And the money that it requires to create those benchmark data sets and the know-how that's required, I think is very underestimated. You don't have to create, I'm not saying you curate all the TB World's data, right? What I'm saying is, even if you capture all the TB World's data as is and put it in a data lake and make it accessible to everyone, still does not solve your challenge. You still need those benchmark data sets that require special effort to create purpose appropriate data. And this shows up throughout the AI lifecycle. The kind of data you need in the prototyping discovery stage is different from the kind of data you need when your use case is stabilized and you want to deploy it, right? And who creates the data set? How do they create it? Do they have the data standards to say, okay, I'm going to create this, which means I have to test this. If you're going to test a screw, you're going to say, okay, this is the PSI that I'm going to test it to. So there's an engineering test that any engineer can take that and test that, right? Do a local setup of that test. But we haven't created that for a lot of AI use cases, right? And to me, that an expectation that simply because we have oceans of water, that we'll be able to drink it or give it intravenously, and not realizing the cost of the filtration and the effort that requires and the infrastructure that takes, that worries me a lot.
Incredible. Unfortunately, time is up. I'm sure there'll be a whole lot of questions, but we can continue the conversation over dinner. The panelists are here. We'll have dinner served after this. I want to end on a big note of thanks to my fellow panelists. I could see the passion, the insight, and the depth, and some of the points that you said. I think, Raymond, you talked about, can you show the reality, the example of the principal secretary seeing the GPU. Can we extend people's imagination? What struck me is the idea of collaboration is when we look at each other and talk to each other and see what each other we are doing, problems we are facing, it is extending our imagination. What is an idea to us becomes a reality of someone who has already gone further down that path. It again goes back to why yesterday we saw collaboration as the #1 need, and also points to the need of a network of networks, organizations who are organically connecting up with each other to convert the imagination to reality, to show what is possible, to help each other in even asking the right questions. So with that, I would like to give a big round of applause to all the audience who have patiently hung on, to the panelists, and last but not least, Carnegie India for bringing us all together over the last 2 days. A big, big thank you to you all. With that, good night. We'll continue the conversation and back to the MC.
Thank you, Shankar. Thank you, dear panelists, for a thought-provoking conversation. Please, as a group photograph. That brings us to the conclusion of Day 2 and of the GTS Innovation Dialogue 2025. Thank you to all our panelists, speakers, moderators, and all of you present in the room for being part of this incredible journey of ideas, innovation, and impact. I think it's been a pleasure, just from the outside, to watch all these experts learning from each other in real time. And yes, it's been absolutely wonderful. Please join us all for dinner in the ballroom. and we look forward to welcoming you again. Thank you.
Director and fellow at Carnegie India, and also the chief coordinator for the Global Technology Summit. This year's edition of the GTS Innovation Dialogue is also an official pre-summit event of the India AI Impact Summit scheduled for February